Hello and welcome to GECA's event, Innovations for a Circular Economy. We're super excited to bring to you an event designed to inspire, encourage collaboration and share sustainable solutions and innovations, all whilst celebrating today, which is World Ecolabel Day. My name's Michelle Thomas. I'm the CEO for GECA, also known as Good Environmental Choice Australia. For those of you who don't know GECA, GECA is an independent, not-for-profit advisory and eco-labelling organisation that provides solutions for sustainable consumption and production. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and as it's an online event, this may be different for many of you. We meet today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. Also, and most importantly, I'd like to thank you for joining us online today. I do hope this event provides you a lot of solutions. Whilst the title of the event today is about innovations in circular economy, it's also very much about collaboration. Circular economy is about collaboration, and today I am joined by a fantastic lineup of speakers who are here to join and continue that conversation. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank a few of our GECA licensees today who are supporting the event. We have Csiro, who is a furniture product partner of ours, who is providing the GECA certified chairs. I'm not sure if you can see them, but you will see them throughout the day, that are lovely here on the stage. We have Microsafe Care, with their GECA certified NanoSyn sanitizer and disinfectant, which kills COVID and more, which will be used to wipe down the surfaces in the lectern so that we can ensure we're in a COVID safe environment. And we have e-water systems for their e-water sanitizer, which also kills COVID and more, which can be used for the guests that are here today as hand sanitizer. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host for today. We have the amazing writer and comedian and presenter, Reucassel, best known for his work on The Chaser, Going Through Your Bins, on the War on Waste, and the current Fight for Planet A series. We are most definitely in very safe hands today. So thank you, and please join me in welcoming to the stage, Mr. Reucassel.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, across Australia and abroad to the Innovations for a Circular Economy, an event brought to you by GECA in collaboration with the City of Sydney. We're here at Customs House in Sydney. I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And of course, you are all over Australia, and who knows where you are on World Ecolabel Day. It's great, actually, I must admit, having spent a lot of time recently wading through LCAs and trying to find answers to things. Can I just say that we need labels. We need labels that work and teach us. And it's also good to be talking about a circular economy, because I must admit, a couple of years ago, I felt like a circular economy was a little bit like the Loch Ness Monster. There was a lot of talk about it, but I don't know if anyone had actually seen it. So I'm glad we're getting together today to talk about how we can make this a reality, and that's great to see. But firstly, I'm delighted to be here, and I can't wait to introduce you to our first speaker, Councillor Jess Miller. Councillor Jess Miller was first elected to the council in 2016. She's one of the youngest people to hold elected office at the City of Sydney. She was the Deputy Lord Mayor from 2017 to 2018. She's currently the Deputy Chair of the Environment Committee. She sits on the Cycling Advisory Committee, I believe they're in favour of it, and the Inclusion Disability Advisory Panel as well. She's a Program Advisor to Sustainability and Innovation Company, Republic of Everyone. And as a councillor, she's an advocate for the environment and also for a diverse nighttime economy. So maybe focus a little bit more on the environment right now. Please welcome to the stage, Jess Miller.
Hi, thanks everybody. I too would like to acknowledge that we're meeting today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Now, I agree with Craig. It is a bit like the Loch Ness Monster, this whole concept of a circular economy. It's something that people talk a lot about, but we are only, I think, in the sort of beginning phases of actually figuring out what it looks like, what it feels like, and in Craig's case, maybe what it even smells like as he goes through those bins. But what is it that kind of has led us to this point? I think the fact that we have such a huge issue with waste is it's not about policy. It's, well, maybe it is a little bit about policy, but fundamentally it's this failure of imagination and failure to value what we actually have. There's also another thing that I kind of often notice is that frequently the enemy of sustainability, again, it's not always about policies or bins or designs or even labels sometimes, it's convenience. And so if, as part of all the work that we do today and all the work that GECA has been doing for a long time, if we can start to ensure that doing the right thing is not only the thing to do, but we can do it easily and that we're motivated and reminded to do it all the time, I think we're going to get some and start seeing some really big wins. Now, at the city, we're only actually responsible for around about 10% of the waste that gets collected. So we have to collaborate, and we have some fantastic staff and programs, and you'll hear from Zoe a little bit later. We have the Sustainable Destination Partnership, the Better Building Partnership, and we really rely on working through these partnerships to be able to achieve significant impact through scale. Something that we've been looking at for quite some time is how do we enable these collaborations, not just with industry, but also with other councils. And something that's happening that's really exciting that you can see as an outcome of this emerging circular economy is the way that we're working with the Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils to convert glass into new roads. Now, that's just one example of the kinds of things that we want to see more of as we innovate through the circular economy. That's not to say that we've got it all figured out. I think it was probably maybe 4 or so years ago that I stood alongside Craig in Martin Place and witnessed the horrible pile of textiles. So textiles is something that we're still really struggling with, but something that has to have a solution. And so that's really what this conversation is about. It's about identifying the problems, but also working out how we can better collaborate to find these solutions. Procurement is a way that we can do it, but also at the City of Sydney, like we support this program today, we also have a whole range of grants. So for everybody out there who has a germ of an idea, who has an imagination, who can see better ways of doing things, we really, really, really warmly encourage you to jump on the City of Sydney's website to apply for grants, to find out ways in which you can collaborate, because it's really going to take all of us to get this right. And the sooner we see these labels, the sooner we see these signs, the sooner we see these programs out there in the world, the better. So thank you. I'll be looking forward to listening to all of today's speakers, stealing all of your ideas, and hope that everybody at home is jotting down things that they'd like to see, because we'd really love to keep supporting it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess. I agree with Jess. If we can make things convenient, if we can make it the obvious choice, that's often how we need to do it. And you need labels to do that, you need incentives to do it as well. And that's a big part of what we'll hopefully talk about today. I'd now like to introduce our next guest. Joining us online from Brisbane is the Assistant Minister for Waste Reduction and Environment Management, the Federal Member for Brisbane, Trevor Evans. Trevor was sworn in as the Assistant Minister for Waste Reduction and Environmental Management in 2019. He's also served as the Chair of the Government's Policy Committee on Employment, Innovation, Science, Small Business and Resources, and also on the Economics and the Environmental Parliamentary Standing Committees. As one of the nation's first openly gay federal MPs, Trevor also played a central role in the Yes campaign to legalise same-sex marriage in Australia. I know personally I'm thrilled there is a minister, even an assistant minister, looking at the issue of waste. So please welcome from Brisbane, Trevor Evans.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Craig. Thank you everyone for your time here today. And thank you to Michelle and the team at GECA for inviting me to say a few words as well. I know in more normal times, I get to hang out with the team at GECA very often, including at times when we get to catch up, at conferences and expos for waste and recycling right around Australia. Can I also just say, Craig, I'm actually in Canberra in Parliament House at the moment, not in Brisbane at the moment. And so if some bells go off in the background, it is because there are some parliamentary votes happening. So my apologies if there's the sound of bells competing for microphone time as I say these introductory words. I am paired though, so I don't have to run away if there's a vote on at any point in time. As Craig said, I am the first Assistant Minister there's ever been in a federal government with responsibilities for waste reduction, recycling and building a more circular economy. And it's something that I find very exciting, and it's something that I'm passionate about. And of course, it's very easy to be passionate about it and very excited when I do get to work with so many stakeholders from other governments, from local government, from industry, from business, from environmental organisations, GECA and everybody else. It is a really exciting time to be involved. I think Tuesday night's budget was the first time that recycling has ever been mentioned as a key plank of a federal budget, which is very, very good. And you know, I think it's time. And clearly the government and from the Prime Minister down has seen the opportunity that exists for a more circular economy that takes these concepts around waste reduction and recycling and turns them into that opportunity that I know the Councillor was referring to as well, around seeing the potential value in these resource streams, about the jobs and the economic prosperity that can be created if we can start to do things better and really bring about a whole host of changes that need to happen in order to shepherd in a more circular economy. We're also talking at the time when my first bill is before the Parliament. And if it passes, when it passes, Australia will get its first Recycling Act. And there's many things I could talk about today, but in 10 minutes, I've got to try to keep it as brief as I possibly can. So the two things that I'll really call out from inside of that Recycling Act is that it will give effect to our waste export bans. So no longer will Australia be sending its mixed plastics, its waste glass, whole tyres, waste or contaminated paper, cardboard to other countries around our region who are often ill-equipped to deal with them. That export practice is stopping once these laws are passed. And it happens at the same time as the government's Recycling Modernisation Fund is helping to build the facilities that we need onshore to ensure that we can grab the value of these resources. So it's no good for us to stop our exports if you know, the hundreds of thousands of tons of material are simply dumped here onshore or go into landfill. So what we need to see, and what's too rare around Australia at the moment, is the sorts of facilities that can take things like our mixed plastic waste streams, like our pulp waste streams, whole tyres, mixed or contaminated glass, sort them here on shore, process them and turn them into material streams that can go into the next generation of fantastic products. And that's exactly what that Recycling Modernisation Fund will do. And all of our work in this space, the new National Waste Action Plan, the Recycling Bill, the Recycling Modernisation Fund, have come about because of the engagement that the Councillor was just referring to, which is so necessary in this space. We've worked very closely with state and territory governments who do continue to have the majority of the powers and the legislative authority in this space. But the federal government can play a role too, bring people to the table, show leadership, help expand our planning horizon and bring about a level of harmonisation nationally that's, I guess, been missing to date. And it's really important to have local government at the table too, because operationally they've been responsible for much of this going back many, many decades operationally. And it's important to have the experts from the environmental groups, from industry, from businesses, right up and down the supply chain involved as well, because they've got a lot of the expertise that we need to take advantage of as we bring about these changes. There's lots of other things that I could talk about, but I do want to highlight in just one moment on the concept of product stewardship. The recycling bill that's in front of the Parliament right now will take that concept of product stewardship and turbocharge it going forwards. Between the legislative changes we're making and the new funding that we've got on the table with our Product Stewardship Investment Fund, we are seeing dozens, in fact, more than 100 new product stewardship schemes being worked on right now that are going to, I think, be a game changer for starting to see the sorts of better recovery and recycling rates that we've seen with some of the better schemes that we've had to date, like Planet Ark's cartridge recycling scheme or Mobile Muster or similar. There are some really exciting proposals out there, and I hope everybody, for instance, saw the great news just a week or so ago that with a little bit of collaboration and engagement that the federal government helped bring about, Australia is getting its first national battery recycling scheme next year, which is much overdue in my opinion, and very, very exciting for all of us who've known how important that is as a particularly problematic waste stream in the past. Look, there's lots more that I could talk about. We're doing work in the Pacific with our Pacific Ocean litter project. We've got a number of very important demand side interventions around the federal government's procurement policy around identifying big resource intensive infrastructure projects that can use recycled content, and the new national guidelines and standards we're writing to help every council and every development company around Australia to be able to use more recycled content in their roads and their other infrastructure projects. But I think in closing, I'll just mention a couple of big upcoming pieces of work. As the Act passes through the Parliament, as the Recycling Modernisation Fund starts to lead to the facilities and infrastructure being built right around Australia to start to receive and better sort and process these materials, as all of that starts to happen, we are bedding down a plastics plan, which is due by the end of this year. And once that's bedded down, we're going to work on what we see as one of the next very big priorities, and that is the food and organics waste side of our waste streams. And there's some very, very exciting work to be done there too. And just in closing, clearly a key theme of all of our work is the innovation that we need to see across all of these waste streams, across all of the business models that need to be adjusted, across all of the policy interventions and the funding and other incentives that are on the table. Very excitingly, we've put funding out there that's been hugely oversubscribed already for research into recycling, into new and innovative approaches to the plastics industry, and indeed into where food and organics waste streams meet with soils strategy of the federal government. There's lots more to happen. Hopefully everybody's very excited about the manufacturing and recycling announcements that there were in the budget. And with that, I'll pass it back over to you. Thank you for the opportunity to say some words.
Thank you very much. Trevor Evans, the Assistant Minister for Waste Reduction and Environmental Management and thank you. Yeah, amazing amount of stuff happening on the recycling front. A lot of money in the budget there, and it is interesting how the closing of the back door, the closing of the simple out of sending something overseas, I think is going to have a big impact on changing the game. It has to be, obviously, as Trevor has said, it has to be matched with actually dealing with that product here in Australia. But I think the challenge is very much being set. So I look forward to seeing what comes out today from all the different panels we have who are dealing with a lot of different aspects of the circular economy to see how we can find those solutions. So thank you to Trevor coming to us live from Parliament, and no bells during that. So thank you very much for that. Today we're going to hear from a lot of inspirational speakers from all over different areas that deal with this issue. Each one will end with a Q&A following, so you can ask questions. Now, some people have already put questions in, but if you would like to add your questions, you can put it into the Q&A question on your screen today. We'll try and update those questions as right up to the minute. So keep putting in your questions as the day goes on. Today, of course, we're celebrating World Ecolabel Day. And so more than 50 countries around the world will celebrate this day in October. I'm not sure what the other countries are doing about it. Why, you're not celebrating World Ecolabel Day? I'll have to get onto that. Consumers, companies and communities worldwide will celebrate by discovering the eco-labels available in their own countries. And I think that's a big part of the challenge we face, is not only setting up great eco-labels, but making people aware of them as well. Our speakers from our first panel today, the Collaborative Impact Panel, all share many things in common, yet they're all distinct in the type of eco-label program they run. To kick it off, I'd like to introduce Damien Paul from FSC. an experienced CEO with demonstrated history of working in the financial services industry. He's also skilled in the not-for-profit membership-based organisations. And Damien will be joining us online from Melbourne. Over to you, Damien.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Craig. Great to be here with you. Clearly, COVID's had an impact on me, looking at my photo that I supplied and looking at the image in my video now. It's been a hard year. Great, hopefully you can see that. Look, today's a bit of a soft launch of the Trusted Labels Group, which has been created in the spirit of collaboration. And I've got 7 minutes to give you a little bit of a speed date in relation to the Forest Stewardship Council and what we do, and how we think the Trusted Labels Group is going to help us with our messages of helping consumers and our stakeholders make better purchasing decisions around responsibly sourced products. Firstly, why FSC? Forest Stewardship Council, it has come together in the essence of collaboration. It started with this concern around deforestation and illegal logging back in the early 90s. And I was doing some research for this presentation today, and back in 2008, in the Australian context, wildfire and forestry were the two major contributors to deforestation in Australia. So this was a key issue, particularly as the whole environmental movement focused on climate change and a whole raft of other things in the 90s and into the 2000s. And with this concern, there were growing awareness of consumers wanting to know about the origin of their paper and wood products. The Earth Summit at Rio, group of people got together, collaborating, decided that this was such an issue that needed to be addressed and that governments weren't doing enough. They decided to create the Forest Stewardship Council, which is a not-for-profit organisation and very much member-based. It started in Germany. Our headquarters is in Germany, and we have offices all over the world. One of the things I found about FSC when we talk about collaboration being at the essence of what we do is it is truly a membership-based organisation. It draws upon members across both the environmental, economic and social spheres, as well as it has a strong connection with Indigenous peoples, and it has a permanent Indigenous Peoples Committee that is set up and provides input into the standards that we develop around responsible forestry. It's governed by a board of directors in Germany and in Australia, which are drawn equally from those three chambers. And no one area can dominate the policy setting of the organisation, which means that collaboration and consensus is the only way that we can move things forward. The members get together once a year, once every 2 or 3 years at a General Assembly. Our next one is next year, where it's the members who decide on the key issues that affect how we operate. It's a bit like the United Nations, everyone's there voting, everyone's got positions, and it really is where the balancing of the social, ecological and economic interests have a voice in what FSC does in terms of developing its standards and implementing new aspects to the standards as things change. One of the things I like about FSC is it's based on a core set of 10 principles and 70 criteria. And what this means is that with this as the sort of the DNA of our standards are fairly consistent throughout the globe. So whilst there are variations for local economies and local situations, at the core of these 10 principles and 70 criteria that ensures that things that we value, like maintaining high conservation values, like protecting and respecting Indigenous people's rights, like ensuring safety and workers' rights as well, is embedded in the standards in every country. The other key aspect with our scheme, like the schemes of the Trusted Label Group, is we are independently audited. We don't play a role in the granting of certification. That's left to certificate certification bodies who independently assess whether our forest managers or our organisations within the chain of custody have met the requirements. And that creates a greater level of, I guess, independence from the process, and hopefully builds more credibility into the assessment of those standards, whether they've met the standards. And that all leads to, I guess, the important part for us, which is trust in our label and trust in what we do, because we're an integrity brand. We have 3 primary brands: FSC 100%, which comes from 100% sourced material from forests. We have FSC Mix, which is what we call responsibly sources. So there's, 70% of it has to come from FSC certified forests, and 30% can come from what we call controlled wood, which is a mitigated sort of way of assessing timber that can enter the system. And then we have a recycled label, which we're very proud of. One of the things, talking to my team this morning, we're talking about the label and the prevalence of the label. And once you see our label on paper products and timber products, you will see it everywhere. And we've got some really strong brands in Woolworths and Aldi, Officeworks, Bunnings, actively promoting the brand and stocking FSC certified products. So now that you've seen the label, you will continue to see it from now on. You can't unsee it, which is great. This is a little bit about where we're situated and the density of the timber, or the size of the timber forests that we certify. Gives you an idea how broadly the FSC system is supported, which is fantastic for our own industry in Australia, because it means that FSC timber certified here is accepted in places all over the world, and it does feature in both imports and exports. Here's our numbers, just briefly. Over 213 million hectares certified worldwide, with a target of 300 million over the next 5 years. 44,000 chain of custody certificates, just over 1,700 what we call forest management chain of custody certificates to the forest managers, and 1,200 promotional license holders. And that's the end of the retail supply chain that are actively promoting our brand and enabling consumers to make some choices about buying responsibly sourced product. The benefits of FSC, and people say, why FSC? And we talked about the independence and the way we're structured, but here are some of the things we're really proud of. We protect, or the standard protects, high conservation value forests. That's a must in FSC. Our waterways are protected as a requirement of the standard. Wildlife, habitat and species are protected and have to be managed. And the rights of Indigenous peoples, local communities and workers are respected as a requirement of the standards. And if these issues are not managed effectively and they don't meet the standards, people won't retain the certification. It just brings me to the Trusted Labels Group. FSC, its whole being is around collaboration and trying to create impact through collaboration. And when we had the chance to look at the Trusted Labels Group, we thought it was a great opportunity to demonstrate collaboration and work collectively together to innovate and support third-party, independently audited certification labels. We're proud of our labels, and consumers are going to be confronted with more choice around what does a label mean to them when they're purchasing. And I think the challenge for us is to make sure that our sustainable standards continue to address many of the world's biggest environmental and social challenges and ensure that they have real impact. And I think the Trusted Labels Group will help us achieve that for Australia and New Zealand. And I'll leave it there and wait for questions at the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Damien. Our next speaker is also joining us live from Melbourne, Molly Harris-Olsen from Fairtrade. She's the CEO of Fairtrade. She leads a dynamic team strengthening fair trade supply chains, growing revenue and bolstering environmental and economic sustainability practices throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Molly has delivered the opening plenary of the World Economic Forum 2000 meeting in Davos. She chaired Swedish King Carl Gustaf's Business Leadership and the Environment Symposium in 1996 and was named one of Australia's Financial Review's 100 Women of Influence in 2014, as well as serving as the Executive Director on President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development at the White House from 1992 to 1996. A wealth of experience. So please welcome to our chat now, Molly Harris-Olsen from Fairtrade.
Hello, hello. Thanks, Craig. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk to you mostly about Fairtrade in my 7 minutes, but I really appreciated your comments in the beginning about the circular economy, and I just wanted to just point out that we have been talking about this for a very long time. In 1975, Herman Daly wrote his masterpiece, The Steady State Economics. Marilyn Waring here in New Zealand was coming up with similar ideas. Back in the very early 90s, I actually gave a speech for the second Global International Symposium for Ecological Economists. And I talked about the Irish elk economy, which, if you don't know what the Irish elk is, it's an endangered species because its horns grew so large that it actually died because it couldn't lift its head up. And I compared in this particular speech the US economy to the extinction of the Irish elk, and it's becoming more and more and more a reality these days. But it's so interesting to see how these issues have kind of been circulating in the world. I mean, Ian Kiernan and Kim McKay started Clean Up Australia, Clean Up the World, gosh, I don't know, the late 80s maybe, and I was involved on their board in the late 90s. We still have 14 million tons of plastic now in the oceans. So I guess what flagged in my mind is two things. One is that, the circular economy is great that people now sort of are thinking about it and talking about it. And we're really trying to define it, but actually we've known what to do here for a very long time. We've actually understood how these things are connected. And in fact, when I was at the President's Council, at the very end of my tenure there, we stumbled across this great set of principles called the Natural Step, which really looked at the biospherical limits to the planet and what we had to do to ensure that the living system would be able to continue if we wanted to be able to continue ourselves. And I encourage anybody to have a look at those principles because they're quite profound. And what they really do tell us is that there are some things that can be recycled, and recycling is great. We heard a little bit about some great recycling programs coming out of the budget. Aluminum, glass, there's many things. Plastic, actually, we are just going to have to find a way to not use it because we've got not only 14 million tons of it in the ocean right now, but even polyester clothing is ultimately, plastic. It actually lasts, the same, it basically ends up just like plastic. And there's $400 billion worth of clothes in the US alone, most of which are only worn once, that basically get shoved into landfill. And actually your pile of clothes, Craig, was something that has just stuck with everybody. It's even greater, the problem is even greater in the US. So I want to kind of, frame the fact that this is a really important conversation we're having here today because we actually do know what to do. I mean, the second example I'll use on the plastics and how not to use them, Ray Anderson, who was one of the just amazing CEOs at Interface who decided he was going to try to create a sustainable company, realized the epiphany for him was when he realized that the carpets he was making would last for 8 years on your floor in your office and 20,000 years in a landfill. And so he went about, in his case, he was trying to recycle those carpets so that he could relay them, and they were polyester fundamentally. But I do think that as we're talking about this, we need to do two things. We need to realize that actually the solutions to these problems have actually been with us for a very long time. So this is a question of how we implement these things. And that it is absolutely true that we have to collaborate to do this. No individual group, company, government can do this on their own. We all actually do have to figure out a way to do it together. And in my journey, which started with an undergraduate explosion of 3 Mile Island, and I added an economics degree to what was an evolutionary biology degree because of the economic implications of everything I was doing. This challenge has posed all kinds of conflicts. And I landed I'll tell you the short story, on the board of Fairtrade International. I was brought on there to chair the board. But when I got on that board, I realized, oh my God, this is actually a systemic solution to a systemic problem, which is the way commerce has these throughputs, the way it assumes indefinite and unlimited growth. And so I guess in my talk today, what I want to briefly say about fair trade is that it is the most phenomenal solution to a systemic problem, which is that of commerce and trade, which drives a lot of the unsustainability on the planet today. And when I became so impassioned by it, they were looking for an executive, and I was living here in Australia already. So I've actually been running the Australian office and working on the Asia office for the last 6 years. So without further ado, I will just I started to say fair trade after a long journey for me. I ran campaigns on the Rainbow Warrior. there, I worked at the White House, I did a lot of the work at the World Economic Forum. In 2000, I gave the opening address where I said, they asked me what were the key issues for the next millennium, and I said, endocrine disruptors, which is basically plastics, climate change, and water, were going to be the three things that humanity was going to have to sort out if we were going to, be thriving. So Fairtrade, when I landed there, has this amazing capability. That's a great quote from Jacinda Ardern, but I'll let you fly past that. It actually has the structural underpinnings, is the way I would describe it, for genuine transformation in the world. And why do we need it? Well, I don't have to explain that to you guys, because we know that the world is getting increasingly unequal. I mean, it's actually now true that 26 individuals have as much wealth as 3.8 billion of the rest of the people on the planet, which is just mind-snapping, because we've always had an equality problem. That has just blown right out. And the impact of COVID is making that problem even more severe, because that the countries and the people who don't have safety nets and don't have JobKeeper are the ones that are going to be hit the hardest by this. So we have a challenge with a number of humanitarian issues. We have a challenge with ecology, which, your programs, Greg, are just fantastic and inspire lots of people. We need a new David Attenborough, so you just go for it, guy. Are you guys still able to hear me out there? This tech is very exciting.
I hear you. I can't see the normal screen, so I can't tell you what others are seeing.
You can't see what others are seeing.
I can't see the normal screen.
We're seeing you perfectly. It's all good.
Just continue. We are wrapped. We're listening.
It's all good.
All right. So when I talk about systems thinking, which is what the natural step really in the sustainability space framed unbelievably well, Fairtrade had it all. So you look at Fairtrade and it has the entire supply chain from producer, where the most marginal and vulnerable people are, through traders, through manufacturers, and to consumers. And, the whole structure is set up to have markets that are driving the sales and understanding and awareness of what it is, what is the difference in the world? How are you alleviating poverty and creating a more sustainable world through what you purchase? And it matters a lot, I can tell you. And then we have producer networks. We have producer networks in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And the Fairtrade International Board is what's up here. They set the standards and the policy. That's what I was the chair of for a number of years. And flow certification, we had to create 33 years ago or something, because in those days, there was nobody who could certify against our standards. And so what you have in Fairtrade is this incredibly strong structure. And the other thing that is important in how it's designed is it has, when I say the structural underpinnings, the way it works is it has a set of standards across people, planet, and prosperity. They are about everything you can imagine. I don't have to go through the detail of that. Those are measurable. And everybody in that supply chain has to adhere to these. And they include things like governance for how the 200 million in premium monies are spent, for example. And that structure that has the standards is all measurable. There are consequences when somebody breaches the structure. You can identify a breach, and then there's a consequence to that breach, and we can actually kick anyone out of the system, whether it's a producer group, a trader, or a company. We can actually remove them from the system if they are failing to adhere to the standards. And that has, over many years, the more than 30 years that Fairtrade's been around, created what is the most recognized and trusted ethical label in the world. And it is trusted because what we do is really hard. What we do is the detail around how those supply chains are working and what the transparency is. And the last thing I'll talk about is just how this connects with important modern issues like modern slavery. So I mentioned the structures. In addition to the standards, there's a minimum price, and that minimum price protects the farmers from the constantly up and down movements of commodity markets. And coffee, for instance, has been below the cost of production for many years. It's what creates grinding poverty for these very marginalized farmers in the world. And coffee, you'd be interested to know, is the second largest traded commodity next to oil. So there's the standards, there's the minimum price, and then for development, to enable farmers to have access to resources to create their own path to development, there is a premium. And that's now over $200 million every year that goes pumping into 1.8 million farmers and workers around the world in 75 countries. Products are actually sold in 125 countries. The minimum price, the standards, and then that premium is what we call the development dividend. And that's what enables the producers to have access to resources. They can build their own water, schools, hospitals, whatever it is that they choose to do. And what Fairtrade audits in that case The standards are really clear on the governance around that. So the community groups, the cooperatives get to choose whatever they want to do with that resource, but they have to have a public meeting. The decisions have to include everybody. Women have to be able to vote. You know, sometimes they don't. In a lot of countries, you'd be amazed. And what we audit is the governance arrangements around how the decisions were made, and that they did what they said they were going to do with that $200 million. And this is spread across, of course, these millions of farmers. So it's an incredible system that has this robust structure and transparency within it. And you can identify when somebody's playing by the rules and when they're not. And when they're not, there's a way of getting them out. I also sit on the Global Reporting Initiative board. And for instance, Global Reporting Initiative has great standards, but there's no consequence if you breach them. You can use those standards in any way you want, and that's useful. But at the end of the day, if you're really trying to transform a structure in the global economy, for example, like trade, you want to be able to have a way to actually tell the difference between who's playing by the rules and who isn't. The last thing I will say about Fairtrade, which I had the privilege when I was the chair of the board to ensure happened, was we'd been discussing for about 5 years when I took over the chair how we would empower producers more. And at the end of it, when I was the chair, we actually made the producers half owners of the whole global system of fair trade. So it's something in the order of $12 billion a year in retail sales trade. It's a very significant global system. And the producers are half of the global board, they're half of the General Assembly, and every decision we take in fair trade is not just good for the farmers, it's actually made by those farmers and those producers. This just gives you a sense of some of the standards across people, planet, and prosperity. That's easy enough to have a look at later. The other thing I would say is that for companies that are, and there are 193 countries and many thousands of companies around the world trying, and we hope that this will help align the world on the outcomes we're seeking, the Sustainable Development Goals, it's really easy in fair trade to map everything that a company does or a city council does or anyone else does against the goals, because everything we do is tracked in a measurable way. And I'll whip through a series of kind of details about that, but I'm not going to go into the detail because we've had other opportunities to talk about these things. But zero hunger is one of the pivotal things that Fairtrade is addressing globally in these structures. Gender equality is absolutely fundamental. The decent work and economic growth principle is pivotal. Obviously, responsible consumption and production, which is what we're talking about today, is what I believe, and I'll say this unapologetically, I actually believe that what Fairtrade has created on the planet is the only thing I'm aware of that is systematically and to scale demonstrated that it is possible to have an alternative structure that actually creates a more sustainable world and inclusive growth instead of the non-sustainable growth economic model that we've been using all these years. And it's the only thing I've seen that is actually at scale and cuts across all of those sustainability goals. Climate action obviously is pivotal, and Fairtrade is responsible for the Pacific, for all of our producers in the Pacific who are the first that are already being affected. Tuvalu, I think, is already looking at where they're going to move their nation, island, state. And finally, peace, justice, and strong institutions. The governance piece is the pivot around that. And partnerships, which of course we all know and we're talking about today. And I would say, again, relevant to fair trade, doesn't buy or sell anything. Everything we do depends on partnerships. Everything we do is a company agreeing to spend more money in their supply chain to protect against modern slavery or to adhere to all of these standards. We work with communities, schools, and universities. Everything we do is about partnerships. We have created a mechanism, I think of it as a sandbox, where there's a different set of rules, and it is an amazingly effective way of transforming this global structure of trade. And I guess I can say that if everything we did and traded in the world today was by these standards and in this way, we would be an infinitely more sustainable planet. And it's a dream of mine that the World Trade Organization, who hasn't quite been able to achieve the goal of a level playing field even, will one day adopt all of these structures that Fairtrade has devised and proven are working around the world, and will actually make the whole world sustainable. Last thing I wanted to say is that modern slavery is really extraordinary. 300 years ago, the Quakers were working on trying to prevent slavery and stop it in the UK and the US, and we have now more modern slavery than we've had ever in the world, and it's around 150 billion in profits, 68% of which are in the Asia Pacific region, and it's fantastic that the whole world, like with plastics, is really starting to understand the problems in these supply chains. What are the solutions is the question I would ask. And the system that Fairtrade provides, and it's not just a label, I can tell you, the structures are really the only thing out there that is so transparent you can actually identify it. And we do find child labor in cocoa plantations, and producer organizations are suspended and they are removed from the system. It is a world out there where it is a don't ask, don't tell economy. Anybody can push things down to their second or third tier supplier and do anything they like and sort of have a plausible deniability. And it's really important that we find the structures like Fairtrade that are actually going to help transform this thing piece by piece. This just gives you a global picture of Fairtrade. It's actually up to 75 countries now. I've mentioned some of these statistics. It's about 200 million in premium funds, and you can see that Fairtrade has covered the vast majority of the markets of the world. There's still large chunks of Africa that we need to work on, and China is absolutely a problem for us because one of our very fundamental standards is adherence to ILO principles, and China just does not recognize ILO principles at all, and so we have a real problem working with companies and supply chains that are going through China.
Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you very much. Molly Harris-Olsen joining us from Melbourne. And look, I know it's very 2020 to have a problem sharing slides, but look at the positive side. I think of it, we're talking to people in Melbourne and Sydney and around Australia, and think of the carbon footprint we've reduced by actually doing it like this. I love that part of it. So I'm willing to put up with the occasional sharing slide problem for that.
From Kathmandu now for the first time in decades because we're not flying. It's fantastic. It's a great.
It's great. It is. All right. Thank you so much, Molly. We'll be coming back to you soon for the questions. As a reminder, you can put in your questions on the program you're dealing with now. But I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Anne Gabriel, the Program Director at MSC. Anne has over 25 years experience in international roles working across sustainable commodities, environmental, social and animal welfare initiatives. Her former roles include Head of Communications of RSPCA Australia, Global Communications Director of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, and Managing Director of Weber Shandwick Worldwide. So please welcome here in the room with us, Anne Gabriel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just glad the slide worked. Thank you to the organisers, GECA, for inviting the Marine Stewardship Council to participate in today's talk for World Ecolabel Day. It means we did okay last year, so we got invited again, so thank you. It actually feels really good to be with what I think is the largest group of people I've been with since March this year, actually. And obviously together with all those that are logged in as well, and I hope everyone's keeping safe. Certainly, it's no coincidence that this session is called Collaborative Impact. In my experience with international multi-stakeholder initiatives over the past decade, it's very clear that unless we mobilize collective enterprises across institutions, disciplines, and geographies, we will not be able to see the impact that we want to see in terms of addressing the global urgency of the dilemma we are confronted with. Some of these dilemmas are obvious, includes climate change, overpopulation, and overexploited earth, oceans, pollution, food and water security, poverty, marginalized communities, rising epidemics, the pandemic, and the list goes on. None of these, as we know, are isolated issues. They're all interconnected more than what initially meets the eye. The ocean, on the other hand, is not something that just pleases our eyes and hearts. The Earth's surface, about 70% of that comprises ocean, which is spectacularly the same as the composition of our human body. As David Attenborough says, every mouthful of food comes from nature, every lungful of air comes from nature. Without her, we cannot live. Billions of people around the world as well depend on fish as their main source of animal protein. It is the most traded commodity in the world, more than meat, rice, and sugar. As the main source of income, it also provides many communities around the world, millions of them really, to lead a decent life just with sustenance. However, with increasing population, we've seen some staggering numbers, haven't we? We've seen 9.7 billion by 2050, combined with the effects of climate change, global warming in our waters. We're up against some significant challenges. Just in the past 3 decades, we have seen fish consumption increase by 122%, fish production by 14%. And we've seen some staggering numbers there as well, as you can see in the slide on aquaculture production. A lot of that is obviously in terms of addressing food security issues. We've also seen some recent numbers by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in the latest Sophia report, showing over 34% of fish stocks around the world being overfished, with about 78.7% of them landings coming from biologically sustainable stocks. These issues certainly attest to the role that the Marine Stewardship Council aspires to play as a mechanism for change. Founded 22 years ago, the MSC is an international not-for-profit science-based organization aspiring to end overfishing. The MSC is the only wild capture fisheries certification eco-labeling program that meets best practice requirements set by both the United Nations FAO and ISIL. It's a collective endeavor by multi-stakeholders with diverse interests and mandates. Over 20 years on, this bold innovation is no longer just a theory of change. It's a proven concept of change, emerging as a global sustainable seafood movement. It's a market-based mechanism that enables seafood producers to demonstrate their sustainability credentials through a certification scheme. It allows market players to adopt and choose the labeling program, so it continuously recognizes and rewards good practice amongst the fisheries. So this model motivates collaborative impact, allowing various pieces of puzzle to come together to ensure oceans continue to thrive. The MSC is also strategically leveraged and positioned and aligned with meeting the targets of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 14, which is about life below water. We know the recent tracking for the SDG goals in terms of its ambitions hasn't been really all that optimistic. But in the research that was done and presented at the 8th World Sustainability Forum, it was really enlightening to see that the MSC program is driving some of these positive changes, with some of the fisheries coming on board the fisheries standard and delivering across more than 34 of the SDG targets. It's really encouraging to see. Today, the MSC standards is involved in 36 countries and engaged with over 17% of global marine wild catch, with significant progress being shown not just in the certification space, but those working towards a high bar in sustainability, representing more than a quarter of the global marine wild catch. Most importantly, we are seeing that a credible market-based program can and is driving real change on the water. By the end of last year, for example, the MSC reported over 1,700 improvements made on the water by certified fisheries, from ecosystems to habitats benefits, to improvements in the area of bycatch and interactions with ETP, improvements in fishery management, governance and policy, as well as improvements in healthy fish populations and harvest strategies. In a recent research by the MSC and CSIRO based in Tasmania, supported by the Western Australian Fishing Industry Council, and the material was published in PLAS One, it was interesting to see that the motivators and benefits of certification was beyond environmental and economic reasons. It showed that the MSC is playing a significant role and a more meaningful one in forging and establishing good social relationships in terms of social license for operate and also in terms of enhancing its reputation. 10 years ago, we only saw 1,000 products labeled with the MSC around the world. Today, there are over 18,000 products using the MSC Eco-label across 100 countries, covering more than 108 certified species, with an estimated $10 billion spent by consumers in MSC label products. The market reception to MSC Eco-label is highly imperative. As we understand more about sustainable fishing, as we demand more for sustainable seafood, fisheries are also changing for the better. They are recovering fish stocks, reducing impacts, and putting better management in place. These fisheries need to be commended, need to be supported. Positive change means healthy oceans. This is an interesting, in 2017, there was a study done about what is the top of mind threats in consumers' minds. As you can see, terrorism is way up there, corruption, poverty, conflict, civil or external, and environment was number 5. Moving forward, we see now that environmental issues dominate the top of mind in terms of the biggest concern in people's mind. And even if you go onto some of the other factors, they're all indirectly related to the environmental factors. Well, and terrorism has gone down. I'm sure if we did research of this by the end of this year, pandemic would be right up there together with the environmental issue and terrorism as well. So no doubt much of this level of awareness is created by sustainability movements amongst the likes of Generation Z icons like Greta Thunberg, who care fervently and worry about the future they're inheriting. Young people all around the world are using social media platforms, speaking loudly about the actions we should take to save our oceans. Across mainstream media and digital platforms, we see a proliferation of information efforts around ocean activism. Hundreds of David Attenborough's immaculately presented documentaries to activism against ghost gear, pollution, and plastics. Not one day goes away with any of this being seen either in social media, in printed magazines and newspapers, or a conversation in a coffee shop with our family members or friends. But not all is doom and gloom. In Australia, we have seen substantial commitments from state and federal governments together with the fishing industry who have the foresight to leverage the independent and rigor of third-party certification schemes like MSC. The first MSC certified fishery in the world was from Western Australia, the Western Rock lobster, and since then we've had many first. Today, close to half of the wild-caught fish in volume in Australia is MSC certified, significantly above the global average of 17%. That indeed is something to be proud of. The MSC has made positive progress, particularly in the global north. In the US, the number of overexploited stocks is at a record low. In the Northeast Atlantic, it's dropped from over 70% in the early 2000s to about 40% today. Similar improvements and commitments are being made in Australia, New Zealand. We've also seen many countries in Asia come forward and engage positively with our program. However, the MSC understands that to meet our vision, the work we do in the global south is highly critical. These fisheries support the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people and supply most of our seafood on our plates anyway. It is highly critical for us to do more to build capacity and facilitate their transition to its sustainability. The MSC standard remains focused on environmental performance, sustainability, and traceability of wild capture seafood. However, we do recognize that there are widespread concerns regarding social issues in the seafood sector. As a result of that, we have taken steps to ensure that there are considerations around forced and child labor in our chain of custody standard and a mandatory disclosure from fisheries. This requirement will certainly provide seafood buyers and consumers a lot more assurance about the seafood that they're buying. The MSC has also launched the Ocean Stewardship Fund back in 2018. And this year, part of this fund, we had granted over £650,000 to fisheries and research projects working to protect oceans and safeguard seafood. This year, we had a focus on reducing impacts on threatened species, as well as tackling abandoned fishing gear, popularly known as the ghost gear. On the subject of collaborative impacts, while we definitely would like to see more momentum, we'd like to see more players come on board for obviously to answer the urgency of the quest that we have ahead of us. We wouldn't have come this far without the collaboration for so many organizations around the world. Together, they've enabled the MSC Ecolabel to be one of the most recognized labels for sustainable seafood around the world. In a research commissioned recently by Globescan, we're seeing consumers as well tell us that they want to have the right information in terms of when they go shopping, what should they be looking for? What does sustainable mean? You know, what kind of eco-label should they be looking for? So a lot of these are available in the consumer insights that I'm breezing through now because I'm running out of time. But we've got a lot, in a nutshell, consumers are saying they want to play a part in making the right choice to protect our oceans. They're also saying in terms of trust, they trust institutions like scientists, academia, and NGOs more than any other organization, because there's a whole inundation of information out there, and they want a lot of this information to come from trusted sources. So there's a role, as the minister had said a while ago, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just leverage the mechanisms out there, the international schemes that are already showing positive impact out there. It's just a matter of liberating and supporting them. It's also a great pleasure for the Marine Stewardship Council to be part of the Trusted Labels group. I think Damien from FSC had taken you through some of the generic concept behind the Trusted Labels group. And we find that it's going to be simplifying the message for consumers to go to a supermarket, to go to a restaurant, and have to ask themselves 100 questions before they decide on buying a product. So the Trusted Labels group certainly has an imperative role to play in terms of just simplifying the message and the reference for consumers around the world. So thank you very much to GECA and for all of you for tuning in. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have today or post the panel session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. I must say, it's good to see a label like MSC that's at least answering the question of sustainability. Having recently trying to figure out the carbon footprint of fish, I tell you what, that's one of the most difficult things ever. So I'm glad somebody else is dealing with the hard questions there. I'd now like to introduce Michelle Thomas, the acting CEO of GECA. Michelle joined the GECA team over a year ago. She brings to the role her passion for creating solutions and offering pathways for business to choose a more sustainable future for people and planet. She's got experience in fundraising, marketing and sales, and a wealth of business experience that she now uses to drive positive changes across the supply chains. Please welcome Michelle Thomas.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks all. And apologies for the earlier technical glitches. I am super glad that I am not at home doing this and having to deal with those glitches, but I do miss my talking partner, my dog, who tends to talk just at those times when you're about to say go. So I get a bit of an opportunity now to give you a little bit more information about GECA and how we fit into that circular economy solution. So it's about collaborative impact, as we've highlighted a lot today. Who is GECA? GECA is a purpose-driven, not-for-profit. We stand for integrity, independence and impact. We offer type 1 eco-labelling, we offer type 2 claims authentication and type 3 environmental product declarations and life cycle analysis, which I'll go into a bit more depth later. We also offer consulting and advisory, which is for companies that are wanting to support or better their sustainable practices. We develop rigorous standards that are supported through industry specialists. And we also have our sustainable products database, which is our online database, which showcases our marvellous GECA licensees. So what is the value of a circular economy? I think too often it is considered a waste reduction strategy. It's not a waste reduction strategy only. It impacts the entire structure from design, manufacture, through to use and a broader environmental and social issues. Circular economy is really based on 3 principles. It's to design out waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and to regenerate natural systems. The benefits are improving air quality, better water, reduce water contamination, protect biodiversity, minimise greenhouse gases, and so on. At GECA, we truly believe our vision is a collaborative piece. It's not about one person, it's not about one organisation. Circular economy, to move towards a more circular economy piece, it will only work if we all work together. Working together is crucial. The power of the partnership solves problems that no single partner can address alone. It works on those multiple pressure points. It improves information asymmetry. It builds new market opportunities, as well as combining the private sectors, governments and not-for-profits for efficient outcomes. So as we've spoken about today is World Ecolabel Day, and as Craig mentioned, we have 50 countries globally celebrating a World Ecolabel Day. GECA is also a super proud member of GEN, which is the Global Eco-Labelling Network, which is 27 international eco-label organisations. So it's about that collaboration piece. As a member, we're able to foster cooperation, exchange information, harmonise standards, participate in events to promote eco-labels, and encourage supply and demand for a more environmentally preferable goods and services options. And great when I change slides around, but forget to tell the organisers that I've changed those slides around. So I do apologise there. So how does GECA fit into the piece? We have a suite of services that are designed for anyone that's committed to a continuous improvement in sustainability. We start with the LCA and the EPD. Your life cycle assessment is a tool used to evaluate the environmental impacts of a product or a service, from the extraction of raw materials, transportation to end of life. And with the LC data, the information that you get, you can create the EPD, Environmental Product Declaration, sorry for all the acronyms, that can then be used to evaluate the impacts and benchmark against similar products and help businesses drive improvement. We have the GECA claims authentication, which are self-declared claims, also known as type 2 labels. They're more specific. They allow consumers to confidently identify environmental benefits of a product or a service. It's not quite as comprehensive as your type 1 eco labels, as it doesn't evaluate the whole life cycle, although factors are taken into account. The claims are to show credibility. A verification of a claim shows that credibility, and GECA will create specific criteria that are relative to that specific claim. For example, recycled content claims. You then have your type 1 eco label, which is multi-level, multi-criteria, set criteria that show leadership in sustainable practices and processes. It communicates environmentally preferable products to consumers. The type 1 and circular economy, type 1 eco labels and circular economy, as I said, they test the products and services on multiple criteria. We have our standards assessed by independent third parties, and it looks at the entire life cycle from raw materials to the end of life. The GECA licensees that go through GECA certification must meet a wide range of criteria that consider environmental, human health, social impact, and ensure that they're also fit for purpose. If a product or service is certified by GECA, our licensees can use this eco label, this label here, and our rigorous assessment and robust standards mean that GECA certification is trusted and relevant to specific industries. Our stringent standards follow the ISO 14024 principles and the ISIL framework for global best practice, and again removes consumer doubt and confusion. All of our standards align with the United Nations SDGs, primarily the SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production. A little bit more here about GECA's specific labels. We have our recycled product standard, which obviously buying products that are made of recycled content will help shift from that linear to a more circular economy. According to research by Planet Arc, 70% of Australians would be more likely to purchase a product that's made of recycled content. Our recycled product standard specifies minimum quantities of recycled materials by weight, but it also restricts further treatments so to ensure that further recycling can still be done. We have 2 licensees currently certified under our recycled product standard, and we have products ranging from postage satchels to porous paving blocks, a nice tongue twister there, made from damaged bins. Our waste collection service, waste generation in Australia has increased significantly, and it impacts severely on health, local and global environments and economy. With key stakeholders, we realised that there was really a need for a standard, for a waste collection service standard, and the standard sets sustainability benchmarks for services that are collecting waste from the point of collation or collection to the lawful processing or disposal facility. We wanted to improve the accuracy and transparency of waste collection data and have had a huge success with this standard, with the Better Building Partnerships members, including GECA certification in their contract renegotiations. We currently have 3 licensees certified under the standard and 2 more undergoing certification. All GECA's eco-labels, all GECA's type 1 eco-labels do have a circular economy support mechanism in them. We look at the end-of-life criteria specifically. Products that are GECA certified need to be easily recyclable in Australia, have replaceable parts where possible. They're designed for separability and disassembly, and product stewardship services should be offered. I did have another slide, but it seems to have disappeared. But I did also want to say today, and through previous collaborations that we've had, I'm joined by a fantastic group of like-minded organisations with a common goal. We want to share our views, we want to share our advice and guidance and recommendations, and provide clarity on our roles as third-party certification schemes. So how can you as an individual help? Take responsibility for what you purchase. Be an ambassador for change, as an individual or as an organisation. Demand products with recycled content. Demand product stewardships when you're purchasing products. Look for products with more recycled content. Organise clothes swaps with your friends. Look at ways that you can reuse products rather than that usual normal throwing away. That's it, thank you from me. My contact details are on here. Thank you for your time today. If you have any ideas or want to share any information with me, please feel free to get in contact with me there. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michelle. We're going to move on to Q&A to start off. Hopefully we've got our people in Melbourne back on as well. Can I actually start, because it's been mentioned there, but I need a little more. What is the Trusted Labels Group? How's it going to operate? Like, how am I going to interact with the Trusted Labels Group? How am I going to know more about it? Michelle, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we're very early on in the piece. It's basically, as I said, we're trying to come together to define our roles in this space. We do all work together, and there will be a lot more information coming out about it soon. We've got some information that we'll be sharing over the next sort of couple of months. It's been in the process of getting it together for the last, I think, over a year now. Very busy organisations, and we just want to be
Is the intention to promote each other, so that, you know, somebody might know MSC, may not know GECA, for instance? Is it to try and increase people's understanding of those labels that are all at that high standard? Is that what it's aimed to do?
Partly, definitely. I think just a step back, so the Trusted Label Group comprises the FS, the Forest Stewardship Council, the Agriculture Stewardship Council, Marine Stewardship Council, Fairtrade, the Australian Organics, and GECA. And I think over time we've realized that so much of what we're doing, whether it's consumer fronting or stakeholder fronting, whether it's the government or the business sector, so much of that is being done in silos individually in terms of the commodities we respectively manage. And then I think in conversations that we were proceeding with, we realized how much more better if we harness some of this energy that we have, that we're doing individually, to come collectively as a group, whether it's consumer education, whether it's harmonizing our interests with the government stakeholders, or whether it's trying to get businesses on board. There's so much power and impact that we can do collectively together rather than individually. So that was the idea of how these organizations are coming together. We thought we'll use, obviously, World Ecolabel Day as the day to launch and introduce our group. We've got some fantastic ideas in terms of how we want to bring this concept to life, and we hope to share that with you, certainly in the near future.
Excellent. We've got a question that came in earlier. How can business and government best support and drive the uptake of your label? I might come to you first on this one, Damien, and I'll come to you, Molly, as well. How can we drive these labels being taken up more? You know, obviously there tends to be an approach in Australia to never have anything mandatory. So how do we drive more take up?
Look, it's a good question. It's one we grapple with all the time, and I think part of our challenge is how do we differentiate ourselves from other schemes. In talking to government in our space has a policy of partisanship. So there are two schemes. One scheme's the industry scheme, and one is obviously our scheme. From our perspective, we think we need to differentiate ourselves better, so that government can actually look at what it is that our scheme offers and what it is that it protects. And then we would hope that government, like consumers, then exercises choice, and it has an impact on their procurement policies, and they start sourcing responsible products from the labels that are meeting or setting the higher standards. And consumers are already doing that. We're seeing that already, and we're seeing purchasing and supply chain behaviours now from large organisations making decisions to support FSC because consumers are demanding it because they see the brand as providing a trust around the certification process.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because trust is, I think, the central question in all of this. How do you maintain the trust and communicate that to people? And I guess part of that is if there are these alternative industry-based brands, does that going to undermine trust of certification, for instance? Molly, how do you think we need to drive more people to use this and uptake the use of your label? And how do you distinguish from other labels that may be similar but not as great?
Thanks, Greg. Look, it's a really significant problem, and it is one that the Trusted Label Group is trying to address because there is so much noise out there, as was said. And I guess the thing that's fascinating to me is that, you know, when the President's Council was starting in 1992, we had no principles. Nobody was trying to be sustainable. Nobody even knew what it meant. We now have a situation where you won't find a global corporation or anyone that will say, oh, no, we don't want to be sustainable. Everybody says they want to be sustainable. And the number of companies that are actually acting in that way in a comprehensive supply chain approach to that is you know, a tiny percentage. So while people want to bask in the glow of being good, almost nobody wants to pay for it, and almost nobody wants to go to the hard yards to really even understand what do their supply chains look like. You know, we don't have modern slavery hiding in there because everybody's looking carefully. We have it in there because nobody's looking at it and everybody's trying to push it away and out of sight. So I guess, how do we get people? My hope is that we can, with this group, help to educate people on what to look for and why you can trust certain things. And of course, if it's a company that's certifying itself, or if it's an industry-based group company, like the comparison between FSC and the Australian Forestry Standard is just huge. They're not the same thing. And yet an unaware person, or if you don't know the details, then it seems like, oh yeah, that should be fine. Well, it's not. And I can tell you, sitting on the Green Building Council board years ago, you know, they're totally different. That's true of so many things. So there's now every major global chocolate company has their own certification scheme. Would we trust our kids to be able to, you know, mark their own homework? I don't think so. You know, you don't, anything that is self-certified might be a nice initiative and the company might want to do good things, but actually it's not going to ever give you the trust that something that is independently certified and transparent in its outcomes and its standards is going to give you. So, I mean, there's a couple of things there that I think are important. The education piece is around helping consumers know what's the difference, and that means you know, being able to see the difference between things like self-certification and an independent process.
Thank you. We have a question for Anne. What percentage of a country's shoreline should be set aside as marine sanctuary to ensure sustainable breeding grounds and fish stock levels?
That's a really good question. It's a big question, a big topic, obviously, and it certainly differs in terms of which ocean jurisdictions we're talking about. So a little bit more complex to respond to. But what the Marine Stewardship Council tries to put forward and promote is, apart from just setting aside marine parks as sanctuaries, it's just ensuring that at the same time, while we're trying to address the economic benefits of livelihoods that depend on this, communities that depend on fishing as a source of income, that we continue to allow for fishing to happen, but just ensure that it's being run in a sustainable way, whether that's looking into healthy fish stocks, or whether that's looking at the impact on the general ecosystem environment, or that's looking into the management putting in place a robust standard. So that's an indirect way of answering the question.
No, that's right. Look, I understand the complexity. In a sense, that's what the consumers and the public are looking for. We understand. Every time you look into any of these questions, it becomes ridiculously complex. We want somebody else to do all the hard work and then give us a label, so it makes it easier for us to be. That's what we're asking for. Yeah, simplify. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for questions at this point. We're going to have a short break. Unfortunately, we're not going to provide you with food and coffee. You're going to have to make it for yourself. You're in your own home. So please take a brief break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes or so. If you're sitting there at your computer, apparently they're going to be playing some footage from the ABC's Your Planet series, including Fight for Planet A. I didn't ask for this, okay? I hate that guy. We'll be back with our next panelist from the Business and Government Driving Innovation panel in about 5 minutes. So thank you so much to all of our guests for the first panel. Thank you for coming along. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed your tea break. I hope you made yourself a great tea and scones or whatever you did at home. We're going to move on to our Business and Government Driving Innovation panel. We've got a great panel of people here. And once again, as before, you can put questions in and they'll be sent through to me for the Q&A section at the end after everyone's talk. So as the questions come in, send them in and we'll try to deal with as many of those as we can. I'd first like to introduce Peter Milich, the Innovation Connections Facilitator at the CSIRO. Peter has a broad multi-sector experience in industrial biotechnology, food manufacturing, biopharmaceuticals, tech transfer, commercialisation in private and public sector organisations. Since 2015, Peter has delivered the Innovations Connections programs in partnership with Oz Industries, servicing the Sydney and Central West New South Wales. So please welcome to the stage, Peter Milich.
Thank you, Craig, and thanks to the organisers for the opportunity. So what I want to talk about today is some grant funding schemes available to startups, SMEs, to enable collaboration so you can develop wonderful products and services. Also, I want to touch on a few examples of companies that have leveraged these schemes that are working in the circular economy. And then I just want to touch on what Csiro is doing in the circular economy space, and there's lots to cover there. So the Innovation Connections program is actually funded out of federal government, out of Oz Industry, but CSIRO is the national delivery partner of that program. So what we do in this team, I'm a part of the team called SME Connect, we deliver all those three programs. The two other programs I should mention is Kickstart and also STEM Plus Business. They're two separate funding opportunities that come out of Csiro. Every year we deliver about 350 grants, so we do a lot of work, we're quite busy, and that funds a total of about $30 million worth of research activity. And this slide here gives you an idea of the schemes available. So Csiro Kickstart is available to startup companies. So if you're a small company with less than $1.5 million in turnover, you can avail yourself of the Csiro Kickstart grant. It's a matching grant, so there's dollar for dollar matching. And that will fund projects lasting up to 1 year. In that particular program, the only possibility is to work with Csiro collaborators. If you're an SME, you've been around for at least 3 years, have a turnover or operating expenditure of at least $1.5 million, you can leverage the Innovation Connections program. Now that provides up to $130,000 in matched funding. And in that program, you can collaborate with any Australian publicly funded research organisation. And there are about 40 of those around the country. And then beyond that, if there's still some more work to do, and if you've successfully completed an Innovation Connections program, you can apply for what's called STEM Business Plus. And that makes available up to $115,000 in matched funding for up to 3 years. So you can see, if you're a bit strategic about these, about your innovation journey, you can leverage quite a bit of support from government and from Csiro. A little bit more detail about Innovation Connections. So there are 3 options with that $130,000 in funding. The first one is called a Researcher Placement Grant. So that's where a company wants to collaborate with the university researcher. So for example, if you want to work with Vina's group at UNSW in the Smart Centre, the company can contribute up to $50,000, which is matched by government, and that's to enable a $100,000 piece of work, if you like. The second option there is for a company employee. That's a business researcher to be supported to work on a project. But again, this business researcher needs to collaborate to some degree with a university or CSIRO. And that can take the form of having some testing done or using a facility within those organisations. Last of all, there's a $30,000 grant available to the company to employ a recent graduate. So that can be someone with a bachelor's, master's or PhD, and they can be supported to work on an in-house company project, okay? So we partner with all universities around Australia. All the research intensive universities obviously are the most popular partners, if you like, but any university or research organisation or institute is potentially eligible for this program. And just on some of the outcomes, so you can see on this slide here that the vast majority of businesses who collaborate or participate in this program are either very satisfied with the outcomes, and very importantly, I think 86% of businesses who had never worked with universities or the public research sector said they've developed this ongoing relationship, which is a key, for me, a key metric of this program. And that is just to encourage that continual collaboration. And in terms of the graduate option, the vast majority of graduates are offered ongoing full-time employment. So again, some really nice outcomes. Now I just want to mention some of the projects that we've funded. There's been quite a bit in the food waste area. So for example, there's a company called Brannan Recycles, which has collaborated with Ciro's food and agricultural researchers to work on management of fruit and vegetable waste. And they're looking to develop an animal feed. In fact, they're looking to reduce the fruit fly infestation in food waste and then develop this animal feed. Interestingly, also, there's another company called Gotera who are also collaborating with Csiro, and they're actually taking the opposite tack where they're trying to produce or breed black soldier flies on food waste. So the idea is that they harness the protein, that protein acts as an animal feed. A third example of that is a company called Food Recycle, and they're looking to take food waste streams and develop commercial scale aquafeed. So again, some really nice work happening there. Some of my clients are looking at developing sustainable compostable packaging from natural fibres, from sugarcane waste, for example. And that's been driven a lot by consumer sentiment. So they're coming to me saying our customers are wanting this, so how can we do this? I have another client that's looking to extract PET plastic from waste streams. If they can, developing some smart chemistry with Queensland University of Technology. If you can do that, if you can concentrate this high value plastic, then that can add value and lead to a commercial process. Have a couple of companies as well looking at sustainable concrete manufacture. So as we know, concrete is a very CO2 intensive product, and there's several looking to develop green concrete, for example. One example of that is where they're trying to incorporate waste glass streams into concrete manufacture. Last of all, I just want to touch on Ciro's the work in the circular economy. So there are programs in ending plastic waste, for example, circular food and agriculture. So Craig can attest to that example of the seaweed production up at Bribie Island, where they're looking to incorporate seaweed into animal feed. Digital innovation, and that's about preventative maintenance and automation, sustainable mining and mineral processing. So looking at non-toxic ways to extract gold, for example, looking at green metal manufacturing processes and how to clean up waste streams. In the energy space, Csiro is working in efficient grids, in hydrogen economy, of course. Thermal and solar PV and low emissions technologies are being looked at. In water resource management, it's about characterising what resources are available in Australia and how to efficiently use those resources, and also building up an informatics database. Other work is looking at resilient cities, looking at urban edge development, green infrastructure, for example. And finally, there's some work happening in the lithium battery recycling. So how do we develop a domestic recycling industry and looking at new materials and recovering those materials? I might just leave it there. If you want further information on these grant schemes, just I've left there some contact details, and you're more than welcome to contact me as well if you want further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I love a speech that not only gives a lot of solutions, tells you how many solutions there are out there, but also offers you money. That's well done, Peter. You've hit all the top things there. By the way, if you want to join the conversation on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat, if you can figure that out, the hashtag is #innovations4 and then CE for circular economy. So innovations for CE, hashtag innovations for CE if you want to get involved. And remember also you can put your questions in and we'll pass them on in the next session. I'd like to introduce our next guest, Monica Richter, the Senior Manager of Low Carbon Futures at WWF. Monica is an economist and social ecologist interested in the role of business in accelerating the uptake of low and zero carbon solutions. And boy, do we need that. Her recent career highlights include establishing the Business Renewal Centre Australia, a community of practice for companies setting science-based long-term emissions reduction targets, and recently collaborating with the New South Wales State Government and Lendlease to launch reports on the need to tackle embodied carbon in the building and construction industry. So please welcome to the microphone, Monica.
Thank you, Craig. All right, let's get the show on the road. There we are. All right. Good-o. So as a social ecologist, I'm really interested in systems thinking and how we change systems. So thinking about hard systems as well as soft systems. So today I'm going to give you some examples of programs that I run where we have to emphasise the importance of social norming, collaboration, we've heard a lot about that today, capacity building, the importance of carrots and sticks, but also approaching opportunities with scale in mind, because that's the problems that we're facing today. They all require scale. So here we have a chart that shows where emissions are heading to in the climate world with all the historic, but also the commitments that are on the table currently from global governments. And we know that if we're going to get to a path of 1.5 or even well below 2, the science says we need to halve emissions in this decade. So it's a 50% reduction in emissions. So that's 5% per annum over that decade globally we need to reduce. That's the scale of the challenge we face. Now, what did we hear recently? China, 23% of global emissions is China's responsibility. They've committed to net zero before 2060. They've committed to peak their emissions by 2030. I mean, that is a significant challenge for a country where we've outsourced most of our manufacturing to. The European Union, another big 15 to 20% of global emissions. They've made a commitment to 55% reduction in emissions by 2030. So, again, that you can see the scale of the challenge, but also countries stepping up to those opportunities. We've heard a lot about the Sustainable Development Goals today. We also need to be thinking all of the social equity issues that come along with some of the ecological challenges and around the circular economy as well. So I won't delve into that. So this slide here shows two pictures. Fifth Avenue, 1900, imagine horse and cart, every single horse and cart going along Fifth Avenue except one. The Model T Ford is burning along, trying to weave its way through. And then on the other side is a picture 13 years later. There's only one horse and cart and they're all Model T Fords. So that's the opportunity and the possibility that we face, and we've seen it happen with COVID. The innovation is possible. So I run a program called the Science-Based Targets Initiative here in Australia. It's a global program with a number of partners, and it gets companies, the biggest companies with the biggest footprint, to set science-based, Paris Agreement-aligned emission reductions for their Scope 1, Scope 2, so their internal emissions, but also their value chain emissions around Scope 3. And in Australia, we have 25 companies that have set science-based, formally committed to set science-based targets. There are many more that are doing it informally. And over the last few months, we've seen 2 ASX top 20 companies make that commitment and set targets. So Woolworths and Transurban. So, you know, thinking again, you've got Transurban, major manufacturers, builders of our motorways across the eastern seaboard, and Woolworths, one of our big retailers. So they're setting science-based targets. They're going to be driving that through their supply chain. So the opportunities for, you know, members of GECA and other organisations to jump on the bandwagon and help Woolworths to deliver that is really important. And of course, a lot of companies are also making commitments around net zero by 2050. So it's also, we're seeing Qantas, we're seeing, you know, BP, many companies are making those kinds of commitments, and they're going to be delivering that. Just one example of a company here in Australia, Investor was the first property company in Australia to set a science-based target. So they didn't have access to their tenant data. So one of the innovations they needed to do was to negotiate with their big tenants to give them access to their electricity contracts, so that they knew how much their tenants' electricity consumption was, so that they could start to work together, tenants and building owners, to manage the emissions forward. So that's that example of collaboration. So the other program I run is the Business Renewal Centre. I'm a project director there, and it helps companies and councils to commit to long-term, large-scale power purchase agreements for renewables. You know, traditionally, companies would be buying their electricity in the retail electricity market, 3 or 5 year contracts. So these are long-term contracts. You need to commit those long-term contracts because you need to provide financial certainty. So we've seen in 2016, there was no such thing as a power purchase agreement in Australia for renewables. And now we've got in 2020, 80 power purchase agreements, 5 gigawatts of renewables, and, you know, a lot of really good examples, and a lot of really good examples of companies making those commitments. We've also got a number of companies that have made commitments to RE100. 100% of their renewable electricity comes from renewable energy sources by 2025 or 2030. All the major banks have made those commitments. We've got some data centre companies and many more. So just another example, we've got the opportunity through the post-COVID, I guess, to look at greening the economy through investments in, you know, the batteries, investments in building electric buses. We build buses in this country. We could make them electric, imagine that. Solar, we have the highest penetration of solar, rooftop solar in the world, where you know, 20% of households now have that. We could be doing much more than that. And of course, the hydrogen economy, the green hydrogen economy, are those opportunities. So speaking of other innovations and embodied carbon. So embodied carbon is the upfront carbon. It's the steel, the cement, the aluminium that go into building our motorways, our roads, our rail, and the buildings that we live in and buildings that we go to work in. And the steel and cement industry alone produces somewhere in the order of 14% of global emissions. So even if we could tackle that amount of emissions and reduce it to near zero over the next 10 years, that would be a significant service to the globe. So that's one of the projects that we're just starting to kick off now. And it is an ecosystem. It's a big challenge. It's not linear. It's going to require a significant amount of collaboration, but I think we can do it. And a lot of companies are coming to the table and saying, yes, we want to be part of the solution. So before I finish, one final program we're involved in with the New South Wales Government Sustainability Advantage program. So there are a lot of wonderful companies, startups, innovators who want to drive change, and we've launched with Sustainability Advantage, Panda Labs, our program for getting these startups to be curated, to scale them up for impact and scale up to be ready to be invested. So I believe together we can turn the tide, and as I said, we need to experiment, we need to collaborate, We need to approach opportunities with scale in mind. We need to build our capacity, and we need to have the carrots and sticks, but also that social norming that's going to come to that. So thanks very much for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Monica. Yes, I totally agree. We need carrot and sticks. I think we need a few more sticks occasionally in Australia, I've got to say. Carrots are good though. It's interesting how many people I've spoken to who've, councils that have gone into power purchase agreements and, gone into it for an environmental reason and ended up saving a lot of money as well. So it's great to see. But we can't just rely on those carrots. I want to introduce next Zoe Baker, the Program Manager for City Switch from the City of Sydney. Zoe is the Program Manager and she brings a background in social research, strategy and community development to the problems and opportunities of corporate sustainability. The program hits a sweet spot of her interests in how environmental social change can be achieved through engagement, aspiration, inspiration and measurement, transparency and norming. And it's a really interesting program. So I look forward to hearing from Zoe.
Thank you very much. Delighted to follow Monica Richter anytime on a stage because she says half the stuff that I would love to say. So I can keep it nice and short. Thank you very much. Look, I'm super excited to be here today and to have so many people logging on online. This is the strangest room I've ever presented to, but it's the new world. So that's me. The circular economy is such a massive thing. There's so many amazing things that we've heard over today and we will continue to hear. So I'm going to try and keep really in my lane for what I'm going to talk to you about. The problem with circular economy is this really complex, interdependent ecosystem of things that need to happen. But the opportunity is that it's a really complex, interdependent ecosystems where lots of things need to happen. That is exciting. This session is talking about business and government kind of driving innovation. And as Craig said in the intro, that's great for me because I actually sit at that nexus. I run a government program, a government sustainability program for business. Perfect. And as Councillor Miller mentioned a bit earlier, that for City of Sydney, when you look at the waste that happens across the city, we're actually only managing about 10% of that waste. So that leaves this huge extra area where we need to collaborate, all of these things that we've heard from other presenters. We need to work with the people who are doing the other 90% of the waste within the LGA. So we do take an approach then saying, well, who's creating this waste? Where does it come from? Where does it go? And here's a bit of a breakdown. These are 2006 numbers from our waste strategy. We love a bit of policy and strategy. Do check out City of Sydney website if you want to have a look at how we are approaching these things. I'm going to talk specifically about that government program and engagement space, because when you look at this, you see, well, there are sectors in our community who we really need to come together, get in the room with and talk to. The exciting thing when you look at that, I mean, waste, I'm obviously, everyone who's listening, we're waste nerds, we're really excited about it. When I look at a graph like that, it is representing tons of waste, but you can also look at that as representing people. And I think that is a really important thing for us to understand, that people have said, oh, well, commercial office buildings would run perfectly if nobody was in them, but that's not what buildings are for. That's not what businesses do. That's not what cities do. We are people. We are going to generate waste. We are going to need to take a sort of people-centric approach to this alongside, as I said earlier, in that ecosystem, all of the technical solutions and other things that happen. So I'm going to, as I said, stay in the lane and talk about what the city does to engage our people. And we run a range of programs. The government, we love a program. We're looking at those sectors, residents, office businesses and other businesses. And we've got a range of different programs. I'm not going to go super into detail into the sort of how each of those run, but please check out the programs. You can see on the slide that within each of those sectors, there's actually such a range of different people you need to engage. So we do run those programs. Some of them are membership programs, some of them just engagement and kind of promotion programs, sharing information. We run events, we run workshops, we have grants, we do building manager training, very important. Produce a whole bunch of sort of guides and toolkits, and we've got some stuff that we've worked with GECA, best practice guides. Pick up toolkits that a business or an individual can kind of take posters and put that up to really speak in that people-centric space. So this is kind of what we do, and that if we're talking about drivers, we're not, you know, going back to that carrot and stick, we're not talking about legislation or kind of mechanisms to force people to do stuff here. This does have to be bringing organisations, bringing building managers and people along on the journey. What we really push people to do is develop their own strategies, develop policy, develop targets, look at those eco labels and other standards and systems that you can join up to, join RE100, commit to carbon neutral, because once you've kind of got an overarching goal in a place that you want to be, and we have those for the city as well, then you're in a model of, well, how are we going to measure that? How are we going to manage that? And that is the basis of sustainability outcome. If we don't measure it, we can't manage it. That's super important. There's lots of ways to manage waste and circular economy and carbon impact. We do encourage people to do reporting, whether that's to us as our leadership programs or to other bodies. And the really important part of that is when we're talking about all these different people doing good, that's amazing. We really want to keep a focus on that collective impact. And so that means not just counting that and talking about the impacts that the whole cohort has had, but also being able to work together to find better solutions and get there faster together. The other important thing that we like to do at the city is tell those stories, and that's really important for people to be able to see that there's flags on the hill. I can follow those other organisations or other people and find similar solutions. And it goes back to that norm setting. We need to set norms. We need people who are reaching beyond what's currently possible and finding new ways of doing stuff. The exciting thing when we're talking about circular economy is that being that ecosystem, if you start thinking in that systems thinking, you're not just finding the currently possible solution to a problem, but you're trying to work out what are all of the steps in that circle. And what that does is flush out where those gaps are and where the squeaky wheels and the things that don't quite join up yet in that circular economy are. That's an exciting space that we want to work in as well. And that's where things like the CSIRO grants and other incubators and people who are really trying to foster those gaps are an awesome opportunity. So the call to action, I guess, to wrap up at my zero, is get involved. Come and join one of our leadership programs or our networks or our working groups. Get in touch with us, the City of Sydney and lots of other councils around Australia. We are there, we do want to support you in the goals that you want to achieve. And if you are in the industry and you have a solution that you think might fill one of those gaps, come to us, whether we've got a grant or the EPAs have a grant or CSIRO, or there's some other way that we can help incubate that. That is such an important element that we all need to do. So join us, come into the room. The other really big opportunity there that I'd just like to close on is that there is a triple bottom line when we start talking about circular economy. We can talk about that sustainability outcome. Obviously, we want economic impacts, and circular economy is a massive growth area. That's jobs and industry growth that's really exciting. But we can also look for some of the social impacts in there as well. And that's a great opportunity and a really human-centered, to go back to that people message. We want to see those solutions that make the world better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zoe. I enjoy another waste nerd being here. And it's true, a lot of stuff has been led through councils. So get in touch with your local council, and City particularly has a few more resources to actually be able to achieve some amazing things. I'd like to welcome our next guest here. Pooja Rao is a director of Lakshmi Furniture. She's worked there for the last 8 years, and Pooja has a keen interest in ensuring that the company grows within a framework that has the environment in the forefront of all decision making. Please welcome Pooja.
Hello, and thank you for letting us be involved. Customizable, local, sustainable. These are the 3 core values of Lakshmi. We produce contract furniture in an environmentally sustainable way, with 95% of our inputs locally sourced in Australia. Unlike traditional furniture manufacturers who would use a large amount of human labour to produce every piece of furniture, we harness the power of 7 large CNC machines in a 65,000 metre squared facility to replicate the human touch and let us produce more product with a consistent finish. We specialise in manufacturing furniture for the commercial environment, which could be offices, universities, schools, or public spaces. We build furniture to last. However, a lot of commercial furniture ends up in landfill. In the office furniture market alone, every 1,000 square metres of office space cleared contributes 53 tonnes of waste. Office furniture is the least recycled product, despite a lot of the material used within office furniture being recyclable or reusable. There are several reasons for this. First of all, the furniture made is not made from recycled material or is made from environmentally harmful materials such as formaldehyde. The other issue is that the contractor used to make good on the premises may not be aware that the furniture can be recycled or that take-back facilities occur. We need to provide incentives for manufacturers to build furniture with recycled product and also make it easy for the product to be recycled at the end of its life cycle. GECA, as an accreditation body, does work with industry to show the advantages of using environmentally sustainable furniture, but we need all actors in the supply chain to be on board with this. An easy way to increase incentives to manufacturers would be for quantity surveyors to provide credits to locally manufactured, environmentally conscious furniture and to provide demerits to imported furniture made with environmentally harmful inputs. By using local manufacturers, a take-back product at the end of the life cycle would be easy, with the product being sent directly to the manufacturer for reuse. The truth is that furniture procurement and disposal are not done by the same companies. But at the end, we need to show the impact of the decision to the end users and show the impact they are having by procuring non-recyclable or non-local furniture. We need a whole of industry approach. This is critical. By providing real incentives to manufacturers, you'll increase resources to recycle product and ensure that more products will be taken back at the end of their life and recycled. There is definitely a cost to recycle, and the industry must understand these costs and realise that the costs will be on par or lower than the cost of putting the products into landfill. At Lakshmi, we understand that not all furniture can be repurposed or reused. The only way to increase the amount of product recycled is to make it easier, and this is why we are releasing LuxBoard to the market. LuxBoard is a completely recycled particle board that can be used on workstation, table, or joinery surfaces. We are producing a product with an infinity life cycle that will be continuously reused and recycled. To illustrate this, we just show this infinity life cycle of the product. So the board is first manufactured, delivered to site for installation, then used for 5 to 7 years, after which it is collected, sent to us, where we will recycle it. When it is recycled, the board will be chipped, refined, and then produce new particle board. The cycle is continuous and self-feeding. Every 100 tops made from LuxBoard will reduce 1 tree required in production. Once these tops are then recycled at the end of their life, another 3/4 of a tree will be saved. Once these recycled tops are then recycled, another half a tree will be saved from production. And once these recycled tops are recycled, another 1/4 of a tree will be saved from production. In its lifetime, those 100 tops will save 2.5 trees required in production. The same amount of output is being produced, but with less trees required. This is our aim, to continuously reuse existing product and produce new product with existing recycled product. This fulfills the aim of being a truly sustainable manufacturer. Finally, I just want to highlight how GECA has helped open our eyes to recycle our products through their take-back clause. GECA has pushed us to open our eyes to find ways to recycle our product, and I just want to show you the ways 2 of our products can be recycled. So in this diagram, we just show a table product and an upholstered product. So with the table, the top is made in Lux board, and this will be recycled. The metal can be melted down, the legs can be made into wood chip, the metal glides can be reused. And with the upholstered lounge, the foam in the lounge will go back to the foam manufacturer to be recycled, the fabric can be recycled, the metal can be recycled, and again, the glides will be reused. A big thank you to GECA for supporting us on this journey, and we hope the whole industry gets behind this and understands that we need sustainability principles at the forefront of our minds when procuring furniture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pooja. We're running a little bit behind, but a couple of quick questions before we go into our next panel. For Peter, does the startup have to solely operate in Australia, or can a startup with overseas operations alongside local operations also apply for a Kickstart grant? Yes. Yes, it can be, even if you're overseas a little bit as well? Wonderful. Okay, it's good news for whoever's out there wants that. Pooja, quick question for you as well. Do you think there are enough incentives in place at the moment to support businesses like yourself that are trying to take the right approach, you know, to actually move towards the circular economy, or is it really you're having to motivate yourself at this point?
I think it's really interesting. As manufacturers, what we do is we get raw input produced into finished product. Essentially, if we use less input to produce a finished product, we make more money. So in my head, I don't understand why sustainability is not pushed more. Like, very briefly, one of the reasons we use so much machinery in our process is it actually results in optimization of resources used. So it makes a lot of sense for me to be more sustainable, which results in less waste. Less waste is obviously less money used in the disposal. So yeah, for me, being a manufacturer, I don't think we need more government grants. Obviously, if you want to give them, I'll accept them. But I think there's already enough in place with the market that we should pursue it.
I guess just I think that there's the incentive there for you to use less material in the first place. Is there the incentive at the end process for the to be reused and that? That's where.
No, and I think that's a really good point. So one of the issues that we have is the high amount of labour required in the take-back scheme. So for the product to actually be recycled, we have to do another process. That does cost a bit of money. But again, if we put our minds to it and if people get behind it, then we're business people, we'll figure out a way to make money from it.
Excellent. Look at these business people that don't want more money. It's wonderful to see. Thank you to all of our panelists here, and thank you for all of you. I'm sure there's more questions coming through, which hopefully our panel will be able to respond to maybe on social media or otherwise. Thank you once again to Peter, Monica, Zoe and Pooja. Please, round of applause. And perhaps in perfect segue, our next panel looks at, I guess, that next part of the process, which is the waste steps and the power of waste. So we'll start with our first speaker for the Power of Waste panel, Jean Balliard, the General Manager at TerraCycle. Passionate about circular economy, Jean joined TerraCycle Europe 7 years ago. In 2016, he moved to Sydney as Australia-New Zealand General Manager, where he heads up a fast-growing team that operates recycling programs for complex products. Recently has introduced Loop in Australia, a reuse platform set to transform the Australian consumer landscape. Please welcome to the stage, Jean. Yeah, so we'll go on to, there you go, if you click the right one.
Thanks, Craig, for the great introduction. When I was told by Paula from GECA that Craig would be moderating, I was pretty happy with it. So yeah, thanks GECA team as well for putting this event together, and people online as well. So I work for a company called TerraCycle, which is a social business with one mission in mind: eliminating the idea of waste. And we indeed believe that every product you buy today can be recyclable or reused. But the reality is that most plastic packaging that you find at the supermarkets are not, and they just end up in landfills. So our first primary area of focus is to give those plastic packaging and products in general a second life. And we do that by partnering with FMCG companies and retailers and have them sponsor the collection, the recycling, and the research that goes behind the work we do. So we collect hundreds of waste streams around the world, whether it is baby nappies in the Netherlands, toothbrushes and toothpaste tubes that are collected here in Australia and turned into community gardens, outdoor gym equipment made from deodorant cans in the UK, ashtrays made of cigarette butts, and even the next Tokyo Olympic podiums. So to go one step further, we also look at ways waste can be incorporated into packaging. And to do that, we work with cleanup organizations around the world, including here in Australia, in Cape York, where we collect plastic from riverways and the ocean. We work on a plastic pellet formulation that then brands can reuse. An example here is Procter & Gamble making the world's first shampoo bottle made of beach plastic. They since then expanded it to other categories like dishwashing liquid and other brands like herbal essences. You can actually find those bottles at Woolies today. So even though making products recyclable and making them from waste is critically important, we also acknowledge the fact that we're not solving the root cause of waste. And this is why we created and launched Loop, which is a zero waste shopping platform currently live in the UK, US, and France, and launching next year in Australia with Woolies. So Loop as a concept is not new. We've actually looked at wisdom from the past with the good old milkman model. And if you think about that model, like the packaging, so the milk bottle was an asset of the dairy company. So they would be financially motivated to make that milk bottle last longer. And then what happened? You can see here, so 1955, disposability, that's an actual ad from Life magazine where you could see families throwing away like, plastic cutleries and plastic plates, which sounds like really crazy today. But back in the day, like we were celebrating the fact that it was saving us time, it was bringing convenience and affordability. So the principle of Loop is to maintain those virtues while solving the waste problem. So how does it work for consumers? You'll be able to buy your product like in store, online as usual, but you will receive them in a reusable format. You pay a small deposit on your packaging, enjoy them as usual, and then you'll be able to return them. So either you get your deliveries picked up or you can drop off your products at store. Loop is then in charge of refunding the deposit, emptying, cleaning the packaging, and sending it back to the brand so that it can be refilled and used again and again. So that change of ownership of packaging from the consumers who honestly don't want to own the empty packaging back to the manufacturers, like unlocks so many new design and packaging features. We can, example of the Häagen-Dazs ice cream, keep the ice cream frozen longer. Consumers don't get their hands cold when they hold it. Packaging is like genuinely and objectively more beautiful. We learned that consumers no longer place some of their packaging, like cleaning wipes, under the sink, but they would put them on their bench top. And that's a big win for brands that are still motivated by gaining market share. We also learned that consumers, when going home, tend to empty their packaging into nicer packaging. So why not give that to them in the first place? Brands can go back to their iconic and original format, like Coca-Cola and the glass bottle, or massively innovate and like Ren Skincare using the world's first reusable pump. every product that loops, so parts that cannot be reused, like a toothbrush head or razor blade, can be removed and sent back to TerraCycle for recycling. In the same mindset of reducing waste, this toothpaste is dehydrated. It's just the right amount for consumers to brush their teeth, and it requires much less water. So to wrap up, the power of disposable item, which is so wasteful, is that it does bring convenience. And the biggest learning for us at Loop is that in order to convert the mass consumers and not just the waste nerds that were here today, is to, one, make this packaging appealing for them and unlock new features, but two, really keeping this convenience. So that's why we want to have a wide range of products available where they already shop. We want to manage the cleaning and refill for them so that they don't have to carry that to the store and have to do it themselves. And lastly, we want to have disposable options wherever they live. So whether it's through municipal bins, offices, and so on. So by making sure that products never become waste in the first place, this is how we can eliminate the idea of waste. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Not only a great idea, I'm fascinated, Loop. Hopefully we'll get to ask some questions about that later. Remember, you can put your questions in the Zoom window and we'll try and pass them on. It is a really interesting way to try and overcome that waste problem. Convenience, as we said, I think as Jess mentioned earlier, convenience is the big enemy in so many cases. How do we overcome that? How do we make the better solution convenient as well? Somebody who's actually been looking at that, or has at least been working with convenience stores. I want to introduce our next guest, is Chris Collymore, Chief Commercial Officer at Closed Loop. Chris is a commercially minded with a passion for sustainability. He's led regional and global supply chains at Yum Brands and ISS Inc. He now leads commercial development at Closed Loop, pioneering major technology developments that divert once unrecyclable items to a broad scale, large volume, valued resource use. So please welcome Chris to the stage.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk today on Simply Cups and what we have achieved over the past couple of years. Simply Cups, just making sure that's the point. Simply Cups started as a pioneer, and it really did take a view of the world of, if you build it, they will come. We knew that we weren't going to be able to collect millions of cups in any short period of time, but we knew that we had a technology in the UK that was already being used, and so as a program we went out there and started trying to solve the problem that everybody knew needed a solution. And actually, part of War on Waste a number of years ago helped to raise that to the general public, and as a consequence, we have seen exponential growth, as you can see in the total cups collected. Now, the challenge that brings is it then brings that into the circular economy. And as we've seen today from a number of speakers, the circular economy has much more complexity to it than the linear model that we're so used to. And in fact, because it goes across a number of decision-making points and people within the buying of it, it can often be a case of that I love the value proposition of the circular economy, but I'm sorry, that's not in my budget, so I can't take that into account. And I have many, many stories of that occurring throughout corporate and government Australia. And in fact, Simply Cups wouldn't be where we are today without significant support of a product stewardship by brands that have actually moved ahead of the curve. 7-Eleven, Muffin Break, the Coffee Club, and KFC have absolutely committed to doing things ahead of the conversation on product stewardship before it's become trendy in the media. And that brings me to coming into this space where there's an awful lot of talk out there in governments and in corporate about what they're doing in the commercial space and the circular economy space indeed. Companies love talking about their 2030 plan, their 2050 plan, and to me it all sounds very much like a Hollow-Man episode where you're talking about something happening far out in the never-never, and it's the future CEO's problem. There are, in fact, only a recent example this week, there was a listed Australian major company that announced some great programs that they were going to do over the next 5 years, where they were going to reduce a whole range of things by 10 to 20%. And then the following 5 years, they were going to attempt to do 80%. So that's quite a hockey stick. And I think it just goes to the point there where a lot of people like to talk about what they're doing. Not many like to walk, and they typically are probably talking while they're having a coffee in their disposable cup. So it's not about individuals necessarily. It's about, for scale and scale solutions, it's about what happens out in the big world of corporate. There are significantly things occurring across the journey, and it's great to see the ban on waste going to the export. There's certainly lots of political talk and policy and lots of effort being put into to try and change that whole process. That is the key to unlocking scale and solutions from the circular economy. One of the things it does mean, however, is that because we're looking to do things locally, and it's a fact of life that our manufacturing costs, etc., are generally higher than a lot of our Southeast Asian cousins. And so it could have a cost impact, which is then going to have an ongoing impact in terms of the decision-making capability of supporting a circular economy mindset. We need to encourage that as much as we can, because unfortunately, the sad alternative may well be waste to energy, which is better than landfill, but it's still a one-use scenario. And if the problem becomes too big, then that's going to be a politically easy option to do. We at Closed Loop have been working fast on trying to come up with large scalable options. We've had a number of false starts in trying to look at things which were good ideas but weren't going to have scalable solutions. So we've now got active into roads, where glass is great going to roads. It's been done lots of times and over many years, and in fact we're relearning that. But we're actually looking at putting other things in the roads, and we just are in the process of putting coffee cups into roads. And we have a range of other products which are very difficult to recycle, where we can make them use and actually replace products within those things, and so they're reusable over and over again. We've developed a plasterboard replacement, and we're very close to getting that done in New Zealand, and we're very active in the investment range in Australia, where we can use multi-layered packaging, which is incredibly difficult to recycle, and we're hopeful very soon to have that board that meets Australian and New Zealand building standards. Working with KFC, we've used things in replacing concrete curbing. We've got curbings in Sydney that have been broken by cars and concrete for 6-7 times over a couple of year period, and we've put in recycled plastic curbing, and it's still there 2 years later and hasn't got a dent on it. So there's real options that can be done at scale, but they need support at a broader level from the corporate and government perspective. And it's not just policy change, it's actually structural change in how things go about to be made in decision-making criteria. So ultimately, my message is that if there's not a leap of faith and there's not more big pioneering scale options that are supported by broader governments and corporate in Australia, with that leap of faith, we could all end up being just floating around in a sea of waste at any rate in some point in time in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Some interesting examples there. I also like the fact that Chris spoke about the fact that, I've had false starts as well. It's, this is not, it's often about attempting these things and hitting a wall and going, hang on, what's wrong with this solution? So it's good that he's admitted that. They didn't get perfect every time. I mean, I like the fact he's worked with KFC. I mean, who would have thought what a brilliant solution to the problem of big buckets is to put them on the heads of cricket viewers. I mean, an amazing solution to solve waste problems. No, but it is great to see that we're trying to find solutions to these problems. Our next speaker was going to be Paul Klemenko, CEO of Planet Ark. Unfortunately, he's a little bit under the weather today, but luckily we are being joined by Steve Morris, who is the Head of Circular Economy Development at Planet Ark, so somebody who's very much across this issue, and is also founder of Close the Loop, as opposed to Closed Loop. So if we can please, hopefully he's online now, if we can cross to Steve Morris.
Thank you very much, Craig. Can you just confirm that you can hear me and see the slide?
I can hear you. Can we see the slide? Yes, we can see the slide and we can hear you. Go ahead, Steve.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. And yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Fairly short notice for me, but like most of the speakers and those of us viewing, I have such a passion that I'm sure it'll be easy enough to get in the groove quickly. Hello to Vina, Chris, and John, my colleagues there. The power of waste. Let's have a look at the definition of waste and the phrase, what a waste. Isn't it interesting that, that waste is really a lost opportunity? But waste is not present in nature. You know, so why do we have it? Why do we have plastics in our oceans? And it's pretty much because waste is a result, an outcome of a linear economic model where design hasn't been considered at the earliest stage. The three major pillars that are really easy to define regarding the transition to circularity include pillar number 1, and perhaps most important, design out waste. Pillar number 2, keep products and materials in circulation for longer. And pillar number 3, build regenerative systems, including business models. I think Paul might have given me this slide to just test me a little bit here, throw me under the bus, because globally, I'm sure we do use 100 billion tonnes of materials every year, but I'm pretty sure that's not per person. So we'll run with 100 billion tonnes per year between all of us. And 2/3 of that raw material is squandered. Now, just think of the embodied energy and all of the effort and money and resources that have gone into those products and materials sitting in landfill. As Australians, we generate about 2.5 tonnes of waste each per annum. That's equivalent to 2 small cars each. And by the way, we only recycle about just over 50% of our waste in Australia. Now, the power of collaboration, Planet Ark has been given the opportunity and the responsibility to build Australia's circular economy hub. And that circular economy hub has a mission, and the mission is to enable Australia's transition to a circular economy, to assist, to guide. Part of that transition includes handling waste, and I'll focus on that for the last minute here, and the elements of the Australian Circular Economy Hub that are relative to waste, and that is pretty much all of it, although waste and recycling is only a small part of the transition to circularity. But we are building a marketplace. We're partway through scoping out what that marketplace for products and materials of recycled content will look like. May I say that we are not about reinventing the wheel. We're about collaborating with existing marketplaces. It may be a mall type approach where you walk in through the Australian Circular Economy Hub and there you see marketplaces for the materials and the products that are relevant to your industry. So that's the marketplace. Circular procurement being mentioned today, absolutely essential as far as we at Planet Ark are concerned, that the top priority is to build resilient markets for products of recycled content, and then the infrastructure will follow. Metrics. We are measuring circularity at the Australian Circular Economy Hub, and we are collaborating with the states to make sure that the states, as they start to measure circularity, and many are, that we're using the same data sets and the same metrics so that we can create an Australian circularity gap report and indeed feed into the global circularity gap report. Then we've got priority sectors. We need to choose the coalition of the willing. Which industries, which materials, or indeed which value chains are most ripe for collaborating on the transition to circularity. Planet Ark's famous for its awareness raising and its education, and that's a big part of what the Australian Circular Economy Hub will be bringing to the table, largely through the central hub, which is being built right now, and as you can see here, we'll be launching on the 24th of November. That central hub is all about curating and connecting. It's about collaborating. It's about building a collective intelligence, meeting, knowledge sharing, etc. So that's Planet Ark. I thank you for the opportunity today. Look forward to answering some questions and getting involved with the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. You did a great job stepping into the void there. I appreciate it a great deal. Our next speaker probably needs very little introduction, but I'll introduce her anyway. It's Veena Sahajwalla, the Laureate Professor at the Smart Centre UNSW. Professor Veena Sahajwalla is an internationally recognised materials scientist, engineer and inventor revolutionising recycling science. She's renowned for pioneering the high-temperature transformation of waste in the production of a new generation of green materials. In 2008, Veena launched the world's first e-waste microfactory, and in 2019, she launched her plastics microfactory. And she's also, in 2019, was appointed the inaugural director of the Circular Economy Innovation Network by the New South Wales Government through its Office of Chief Scientist and Engineers. So I think definitely Veena will know what a circular economy is. Please welcome her to the stage.
Thank you very much, Craig, for that very kind introduction. And I'd like to also thank GECA. It's been absolutely a privilege to be here amongst some incredible people who are really sort of, in a way, challenging us to I suppose, think differently. And that's really what our work at Smart Centre and of course, the whole sort of Circular Economy Innovation Network is all about. As you've heard, we are, of course, with the Circular Economy Network, is very much about thinking about innovation and science and how a lot of these new ideas can actually change practices. And I'm not going to repeat what a lot of my esteemed colleagues have already said. You get that. We all get that. I think the important question for all of us is going to be that if we've got all of these materials already present in our economy, and if we are absolutely reliant on these types of products, how are we going to possibly look at this entire stockpile, if I can put it this way, right? And I wanted to actually show you a stockpile. So in this case, unfortunately, I think the audience can't see this, but imagine a mega stockpile of waste tires. And of course, as you can appreciate, it's not out of this world to imagine that we all have had opportunities to, I know I've sort of damaged a tire or two in my life. And of course, we all do. So the realities are, as much as we talk about designing out waste, we have to take all of this into a holistic context, as in we've got to understand the waste, the materials, its functionality, but the most important thing in all of this, of course, is manufacturing. So asking the question, how do you make materials? How do you make products? If we are going to have a future where recycling, circular economy, and the more sophisticated way of thinking about materials coming back to life over and over again happens, you can't exactly sort of go, well, whether it's a bus or a car, that I'm going to drive it without tires, right? So, I mean, let's sort of get that fact straight. We know we've all got our phones, our electronic devices, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to just kind of lay the foundation just to talk about how the work at the Smart Centre is really all about understanding circular economy when we can actually relate materials to manufacturing to products that come into our hands that go right back into manufacturing again. So imagine a future where all of our mobile phones, our electronic devices, all of these expensive materials that go into making our devices come back to life over and over again. Because of course, you know very well that once you make materials, even if the product becomes obsolete, those products don't actually, even those products with the materials in them, the materials don't actually ever die. And what I mean by that is if I tell you that all the copper in a car, for example, is something that can be recycled for as long as we want. So metals, as an example of a material, is recyclable forever. Now that didn't just happen overnight. I mean, we didn't, we take for granted that metals like steel can be recycled over and over again, and copper and so on. There's a lot of science and innovation that goes into making that possible. And I guess the realities are, when we think about a car, you can almost sort of go, right, okay, we recycle steel, but let's stop using plastics in cars. Now, is that really feasible? Not really. So I guess the reason why I'm making that point is when cars are manufactured, the reason why plastics went into making cars in the first place is because they actually reduce weight of a car. You can't exactly say, well, I'm not going to have all that fabulous glass windows, you know, the laminated glass, all of that in my car. Safety glass and all of these types of products are designed to keep us safe. So what we have to ask is, products are obviously designed, you know, and people have used the word people-centric and human-centric. Absolutely, we've got to bear that in mind. But we also have to bear in mind that our products become more and more sophisticated. We need to think about, therefore, recycling and manufacturing right here in Australia in a far more sophisticated manner. And that means we've got to not only do the collection, but we've got to understand how we're going to remanufacture this over and over again. So I wanted to just take you through a few different examples. When I mentioned copper, copper, of course, is an example of a metal that's there in electronic devices, but you could almost sort of say, well, if we're going to be all driving around hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, it's not just about the simple metals. And there's nothing simple about copper. It is a very sophisticated metal without getting into the details. But there are so many other materials that make life more interesting, more livable. So we've heard mention of batteries. And again, we've got valuable metals that are present in our batteries. So you can start to then unpack and go, what happens to all the electric vehicles when they come on road? And we've got all these batteries that we have to recycle. So we've been funded through the Australian Research Council in really understanding how we bring together recycling and manufacturing. And we've been harnessing and looking at harnessing different types of metals in a way that it all makes sense. But the important point in all of this is, as we've heard over and over again, it's about all of us as also consumers. And we've heard that we need to make the right choices. But sitting somewhere in between all of this ecosystem is our ability to be really clever as manufacturers. So we can actually create jobs that are coming out of the materials that don't just go into landfill, but materials that can be reformed and remanufactured over and over again. And even when the products become obsolete, we go back and we harness those products, bring back those materials, whether it's glass, plastics, or metals, and we can use those forever in our economy. And that's really what ultimately our solutions are all about, is we need to think about creating value out of our materials. So these materials have been undervalued because we simply go, too hard, can't be recycled, no, they must end up in landfill. So the idea and the reason why I wanted to bring up one of these, and unfortunately for the audiences sitting at home are not going to be able to see this, but I did bring this little product here, because I'm sure Craig will remember from a couple of years ago when we were, in fact, doing a bit of footage in our microfactories, and we had our plastic filaments that had been made out of 100% recycled plastics. And I think you might remember that he was wearing these beautiful glasses. That's it, perfect. So now I thought, well, we might show to Craig that we've actually made something that's a little bit more complicated than just making glasses. Not that glasses are easy to make by any means, but the reason why I want to show some of these more sophisticated parts is what it actually goes to show that the 100% waste that we sourced out of the plastic supply chain where this material has come from is all out of the waste PPE plastic. And we know how much of that is available. Now imagine if that plastic could be reformed into a brand new filament that could then be fed into 3D printers and could all be done in a local microfactory. So you've suddenly got a situation where these materials are now just not materials that are, oh my gosh, it's waste PPE. Oh, good Lord, we've got to burn it because it's contaminated. That would be a waste of this valuable plastic, right? But imagine if you could have the right manufacturing conditions that took care of the bugs, took care of the materials, manufactured new products. What you need is that clever science that underpins the transformation in our economy. And that's really what this is all about. It's about not just what we're using, is how we make it, how we put it into our economy, and how we bring these products back to life over and over again. And imagine if these types of microfactories were available to us all through the country, and we had localized ability to take waste, not transport it over thousands of kilometers, but take waste in your local regions, make these value-added products, help local manufacturers make things so that we can actually take care of supply chains locally, and of course, contribute in a positive, meaningful way to our economy. Because imagine if you could source sophisticated parts, I think someone mentioned repairability today, you could actually repair all your complex machinery, all your equipment. So we would talk about plant and equipment and making things. Remember, we've got to think the whole of supply chain. How do you actually make equipment? How do you actually make products so you can put it back into production over and over again? So I wanted to just show you a few examples of products that we have indeed been making. We've been making products as an alternative to ceramics, and we've been doing that as a combination of waste textiles and waste glass. So yes, the two unlikely partners, a hard glass combined with textile to create green ceramics. And all of this without getting into the details of how we do it. The important point in this is, yes, you can take a combination of waste materials and manufacture products that still meet the specifications. So that's the important thing. It's about producing quality products. And the way you produce quality products is about understanding manufacturing and measuring performance. So it's doing the science, measuring performance, and understanding whether it's fit for purpose. That's the important thing. Is it fit for purpose? And I guess that then takes us to that whole important question. Is it going to ultimately enable economies to flourish? That's really the whole point. Are we able to make these kinds of products while delivering economic value and doing it in a way that makes business sense? And all of this has to be part of the conversation. So we've shown through some of our micro factories where we've manufactured these filaments that we're talking about and shifting the dial in the way we think about more sophisticated products and making these plastic products through various solutions. So I wanted to ultimately just finish up. You're seeing a picture of a micro factory. And again, I think Craig will probably remember this because that's where we were doing a bit of that filming. And we are now running these micro factories at UNSW. But I'm also pleased to say, in finishing off in my last slide, that there are so many incredible businesses, big and small, in Australia who actually want to be proactive in doing the right thing. Embracing science and innovation does take courage, particularly if you're going to be the first one to embrace that science and innovation outside a university and a research environment. So the fact that we've not only established these microfactories at UNSW, but we also have some incredibly amazing industry partners who've taken on these microfactories and doing a lot of this manufacturing, giving it a go, but also equally understanding how the science works, that's important. So I think to me, we're really clever in Australia. We need to be really clever in leading the charge, showing the rest of the world that these materials are not waste, they are resources. They're resources waiting to be harnessed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veena. It does look very impressive, the new 3D printing model. What is it? Is it actually something that was just an impressive shape?
We were actually exploring all kinds of parts in a machinery,
yeah,
without giving away too many secrets.
Okay. Veena will never give away the secrets. That's the unfortunate thing. All right, we'll come back to that in a sec. I want to ask you, Jean, first about Loop.
Yes.
Which is coming to Australia 2021.
Correct.
Hopefully. And it's already been rolled out in some countries overseas. How effective, what's the take-up been like? If people are taking
So it's still pretty recent. So we launched Loop in France and the US first, so Paris and East Coast of the US in May 2019. So there's still like a lot of learning. This week we are rolling out the in-store model. So it used to be online only, and we'll be experimenting Loop in a store environment. And right, like the uptake is pretty good. So we have 100,000 users around those three countries. We recently launched with Tesco in the UK, and then we'll have Canada, Japan, and Australia next year.
Great. So people are taking to it.
Yes.
And kind of sticking with it once they've taken it up as well.
Yes. Yeah, pretty good.
And is it going to be, what's the price of it? Is it more expensive? Is it kind of similar?
So we try to stay similar to a normal like consumer good product, and the price is really decided by the brands. So they do their own study, and the idea is to make it on par. The only difference is that you would be paying a small deposit that obviously you get refunded.
Yeah.
For some products that are completely different because they have more features to it, and I showed a few examples like ice cream containers. The price may be like 10 to 20% more expensive, but consumers realize that there is more benefit to it.
Yeah, great. Oh, it would be fascinating to see. A question for Veena. How far away do you think we are from having microfactories in our own homes or communities? Maybe communities is the first step.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually advocate having it in your own home. Although it's interesting, of course, when you look at the sort of finishing end of what you can do with 3D printers, it's becoming really common. So people can, of course, print parts in their own home, if you can imagine that. Now, that's an invention that's already there. It's that feedstock, plastic filaments that are then made out of recycled plastics. So you can imagine some of those finishing items at community centers, at small businesses, absolutely feasible. But even the plastic filaments that we have, which operates in about 50 square meter space, there's no reason why you can't have community centers in places where, for instance, some of the plastics is already being collected. They're not all kinds of plastics that can be transformed in this way. But we already do have some of the micro factories that are operating in regional towns. So one example is out at Cootamundra. So yeah, I guess from my point of view, the fact that we've had a few already in development, some that we've kickstarted, and some that we will probably be announcing not too in the distant future.
I'm not going to give it away as usual. Yeah, Chris, I'll come to you first on this one, and then Steve as well. Come to you this, but you can all answer this. And Chris, I guess you talked about the fact that it takes some companies stepping ahead to kind of actually undertake the hassle of getting into it and the experimentation. There's a question here. What do you think is the biggest barrier and the biggest opportunity to take circular economy to the next level? I'll come to you first on that, Chris.
The biggest barrier is having products which actually meet at scale existing alternatives that are either beat or meet the specification and are commercial in price. It all comes down to price in the end. There's a small market, niche market that will pay a premium, but ultimately if you want scale, it's got to meet everything that you need at the right price.
But I guess that's the interesting thing about price, is that what we don't factor in the price is we don't really factor in the price of waste. We don't factor in the price of taking a material, putting it in landfill, not using it again. That kind of social cost or environmental cost isn't factored in. So do we need kind of more of a policy leadership that actually tries to factor that in to make it so that if you are doing the right thing in recycling, that there's a benefit there, or that's taken into consideration? I'll come to you on that, Steve.
Yes,
I'm hoping you're still there.
Yes, I am, Craig. Look, the biggest barrier, as I see it, is the lack of resilient markets for products of recycled content. You know, we can have all of the infrastructure that we like, but if there aren't resilient markets there, there's a bit of a stigma attached to products of recycled content. And I think over the last 20 years, we've come from a space of perhaps poor quality being associated with recycled content. Whereas in today's day and age, like Tonoplast is an asphalt additive, for example, that improves the performance of a road. It's not recycling unless you're improving the performance of the virgin product that you're replacing. So that's the barrier. And the opportunity for me, Craig, is that it's not so much an opportunity, it's that we don't have a choice. We live on a planet of finite resources. Our population is growing, and we all want a certain quality of life, and we all need food, and we all need jobs. That's just a hiding to nothing if we model our success on GDP and some of these outdated measures that we're using at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Chris, I mean, is that the case for you? So, for instance, putting coffee cups into the roads, does that increase the quality?
Absolutely, it actually replaces imported material, and was shown in our testing. We're just waiting to get all approved. That actually improves the performance of the road, and so that's one of the key things. Is that it's about leadership, both in a company level or corporate level or government level. Yes, absolutely. There's a price involved in terms of allowing for the treatment of waste at the end. But what it still comes down to drive scale
is if those companies that are actually trying to do the right thing are not rewarded for it in some way, shape or form by their markets growing or consumers being willing to pay, then they're going to ask, say, why should we continue to do it? Yeah, and I guess that's an interesting question. It comes back to, Trevor Evans addressed this right at the beginning and talked about the fact that it's going to pass a bill, it's going to say we can't send this waste overseas. Do you think that's going to change the underlying economies for these particular products? I'll open that up to anyone.
I absolutely think it will, and it should, because I think if as a society, like we're saying, we value our materials and we're clever enough to bring a lot of new science and innovation into manufacturing, then, you know, we can't just give up at the first step and go, oh, well, it's all too hard. I think to me, that's really where innovation and the science and technology and of course, partnership between researchers and businesses plays such an important role, because not everything is always easy. You know, I mean, it's the example I guess I'd like to use is if you think about metals and people assume, oh, it's all perfectly recyclable now, but it does take a lot of effort in terms of research to refine and to get the right quality. So in the same way, if we're talking about quality plastics or quality glass for a different application, you've got to know how to apply that science so that you can put it out into a product format that then, of course, has to meet the standards and specifications. But you can't give up right at the start and go, well, now it's all too hard, I'm just going to bury it. And I think to me, that's where the role of a lot of that clever science and engineering has to come in to enable businesses. And of course, we all know that you can be the first in the world because there's where the risk and reward factors come in, to have that kudos of being a world leader in a certain area.
I guess it comes back though, because you can ban sending these waste overseas, but if it turns out to still just be cheaper to bury it in Australia than to recycle it, we have this problem. I mean, I guess TerraCycle deals with this. You try and recycle a lot of products that ordinarily there's not necessarily a market there for, and you're asking for the product stewardship to basically pay for that kind of thing.
Right.
You know, do you think there needs to be more encouragement to see that happen on a wider scale?
Of course. Yeah, no, definitely.
Or does it happen overseas? I mean, TerraCycle is kind of global.
Yeah.
Do you see that happen much more?
It's always like voluntary, so the brands will be voluntary, like paying for the collection and the recycling. And I think to your previous question, it would be great to incentivize them, and they do it because it's the right thing, but they also understand that consumers are asking for it. And I think we have a responsibility as consumers to, and someone touched base on that earlier, is to choose the right product, like vote with your dollars and be vocal with brands that would be doing it on a voluntary basis.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, sorry. And there is a number of that. I'm saying there's two components in that, the average consumer will have $10 to spend. And if they've got $10 to spend and they've got to decide what they've got to spend it on, then the natural inclination of economics is they're going to buy the cheapest thing, and whether that's from China or virgin product or not. And so that's why the whole focus has to be on at a company level and a government level in terms of driving the use of products at a scalable position that in the base of the hierarchy puts it into large scale usage that is still competitive at the end game. As that builds and swallows up some of the large components of waste, there's then opportunities to grow price premiums for sustainable products.
But I think also there's another important issue, isn't it, in all of this? I mean, if consumers have transparency in terms of the information, and if people know that by purchasing products that are made locally out of local recycled content, it's not just about recycling, it's also about that all important question around creating local jobs. So the fact that something has been manufactured locally in Australia out of recycled content is not just about reducing carbon footprint, although that's kind of the obvious thing that I think you talk about, Craig, but also that all important sort of, you know, layer on top of that, as we're sitting right here in COVID times, we have to also layer upon all of that is, are we going to encourage more businesses to manufacture these products locally, therefore create local jobs? So I think part of this, when we talk about price, is also to put that information in a transparent manner in front of consumers.
Which comes back, I guess, to the first panel we had today, which is talking about labels. And that's, well, I talk to consumers. They're very overwhelmed by the decisions they have to make. And I can see why. It's extremely complex. And you kind of go, can we come up with a simple approach to labels so that people understand this is better for jobs? This is, this is the premium you're paying. And I guess that's it. In that
the problem, I guess, at the moment is because so many of these are voluntary and the government's not supporting it, is you get these great, Gecko and all others, you get these great brands that create these labels, but they don't have the funding to actually really promote it to a level where it becomes widespread, that everybody understands it. We kind of need that kind of support to actually get it out there further.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, maybe I'm obviously preaching to the converted here, but I'd love to imagine that just like we talk about now, we see with food, where people start to understand how much of that food is actually grown in Australia. I'd love to imagine a future where we can imagine a label where we can talk about, manufactured content in Australia. So, people should be able to go, oh, well, okay, if I purchase this product, 75% of this is made in Australia. And I think, to me, again, that's going to enable a conversation, and on a perfect day like today, to mention about, sort of labeling what we could be doing.
I bring Steve back in here. I guess, obviously the consumers are hard because it's a large amount of people to get to and it's difficult. Often there's more bang for buck, I guess, at focusing on procurement and focusing on people that are doing the big purchases there. The Australian Circular Economy Hub, is that focused more consumers or procurement or government? Where's that going to be mainly aimed at, Steve?
It's a broader brush than that, Craig, because the transition to circularity is a complete change of mindset, and so therefore it impacts all elements of our society, from individuals through to groups and businesses, local governments, regions, states, countries, and then the whole globe. So the transition to circularity is not specific to one particular sector. If I may come back and just address the question of cost. And one way that we can, I believe anyway, that we can transition more quickly to a circularity, especially around recycling. And again, I apologise for focusing on recycling. It is only one small element of circularity, but it seems to be today's favourite topic. And the cost of goods sold is incorrect at the moment because we're not factoring in the externalities of impacts to climate change, the fact that we're using finite materials, fresh air, clean air, and clean water. And if these externalities were actually put back as costs onto virgin raw materials, you'd find a much more competitive market for those recycled products where the embodied energy and all those impacts are already there.
Absolutely. Has anybody seen any government working towards costing those externalities and putting it in place? Anyone? No, I don't think so. All right, there's been a lot of positive things in this, but let's see. Yeah, we'll have to unfortunately wrap it up there. Please thank all my panelists, Jean, Chris, Steve, and Veena. A great panel, a great conversation. So many more questions coming in. Unfortunately, we can't get to them. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back with our last panel for the day. Thank you again to our panelists. Cheers.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you all had a good break there. We're going to continue talking about the circular economy. Thanks to you, brought to you by Gecko and of course City of Sydney as well. We're going on to our consumer empowerment panel. I'll actually be handing over the reins of moderator to Ashley Colleen, who's the head of impact at Oz Harvest. After 10 years in the corporate advertising and marketing industry, Ashley joined the Oz Harvest family in 2016, bringing with her an interest in community-based social marketing and behavioural change science. Ashley is supported by a team of talented and passionate communications and sustainability professionals and is honoured to tell the Oz Harvest story every day. And it is a good story to tell indeed. So please welcome Ashley Colleen to the stage.
Thanks, Craig. Give you a bit of a chance to chill and be in the hot seat. So we're reaching the pointy end of the day, and I'd just like to start this session by once again acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my deep respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I also want to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the lands from which you all join us on today. So joining us today for the Consumer Empowerment Panel, as you can see, we have the knowledge of 4 industry leaders here to share their thoughts on how we as consumers can demonstrate our own needs, wants and beliefs every day with the decisions we make to regain control of our consumption. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first panellist, Terry Ann Johnson. So Terry Ann joined Clean Up Australia in 2003. Since then, she has held several management positions, developing and leading the delivery and evaluation of all Clean Up Australia's events and campaigns, including Clean Up Australia Day, Clean Up the World, and advocacy issues associated with Clean Up Our Waste. So please join me in welcoming Terry Ann.
Thanks so much, and thank you very much to GECA for the opportunity to come and speak with you all today, because we're at a very exciting cusp. And this is where today we're not going to talk about the consumer, you and me, every single one of us, regardless of where we're sitting in our businesses or at home, or if we're out enjoying ourselves because it's nearly drinks time, then what we are consumers, and every single one of us is making lots and lots of decisions. Now for us, it all started 30 years ago when one man tapped into an enormous well of energy and galvanised an entire nation to get off their butts and go and pick up rubbish. Now, this was the first time anyone had done that, and it was absolutely revolutionary, and nobody in the world believed it was possible that you could get Australians to go and pick up rubbish. But what he did was he also brought to our attention the rising tide of rubbish that was in the gyres across in our oceans, and the overfilling landfills that we're still seeing today, and the rubbish that's in our backyards. And unfortunately, despite the fact that 18 million Australians over that period of time have actually got off their butts and gone out there and picked up rubbish, we're still not seeing a solution. And the reason we're not seeing a solution is that there's still too much being created in the first place. And so what we now need to do is take our audience, our consumers, every single one of us, on the next stage of the journey, and that next stage of the journey is stop this stuff becoming what we call rubbish. Because you know what, as Vina's already identified, it's not, it's a wasted resource. The other thing we need to do with consumers, we need to drop the jargon. I can tell you now that if you and I walked out of the street or into our front yards and asked the next three people what was circular economy, they'd all look at you quite blankly, because they don't know, and frankly, they don't care. It's called circular economy. I don't think that anything on this next slide is going to come to going to surprise anybody in this audience. But what it does do is it rattles the consumer when we go to them and we say to them, you're likely in the next week to create 10 kilos of rubbish. And they'll go, denial. I don't create 10 kilos of rubbish. And then we say to them, have a look in your bin. Have a look at what you have actually created in the last week. And guess what? Even the most conscious shopper is going to have a problem avoiding excess packaging. And then when you also have a look at what's in the bin, the next shock for us all is, as our friends from Planet Ark told us just a few minutes ago, only 50% of it is likely to be recycled. The rest of it is likely to go to landfill. So we need to explode the myth that recycling is what we put in our bins. What we're doing at that point in time is we're actually collecting it. What we need to know, and we all know that that's a really great first step, but the next step is we need to actually turn this into something else. And that's where the real action starts. And this is where it gets exciting. Because our consumers are actually already participating in the circular economy. They just don't know it. So when we all had this great uptake of our container refund scheme, and isn't it exciting that we're on the cusp of it going national, they're already doing something about getting individual items out of the waste stream back into the remanufacturing stream. But that's not their motivation, quite frankly. Their motivation is 10 cents. So what's really great about that is that they can see now that there is a really great incentive and an opportunity. No longer are we seeing bottles and cans kicked along the street like we used to 20 years ago. Now they're all being redeemed, actively redeemed. And what's happening is we're creating this wonderful stream of clean recyclate. And that wonderful stream of clean recyclate now needs to be remanufactured. So creating the stream is one thing, but getting it back into manufacturing is another. And that's where demand comes in. Now, there's lots of great stuff going on at the national level. We've got fantastic improvements in our recycling rates. New South Wales alone, 4 billion beverage containers have already been redeemed. We've increased our recycling rate from 32% to 75%. We knew that was our target. I really didn't think we were going to do it this fast. We've got incredible uptake of this. We've got to really hook into it and make sure we take it to the next stage. And so lots of great incentives that are going on behind the scenes. We've got national waste collection and processing targets. We've got great things about legislation on single-use plastics that's happening right across Australia in every state. It's all paving the way for something that is really important, and that is to stop thinking about rubbish and start thinking about resource. So a number of us today are really involved in delivering solutions that incorporate the use of the best resources in our design and our remanufacturing. And if that's you, then give yourselves a big tick. Many businesses are also really actively involved in procurement that involves purchasing products that have recycled content. Again, big tick warranted, because that's what responsible business, you're conscious of your role in what we call driving demand. But when I'm a consumer, what about you and me? How do I drive demand in all of this? Because the offerings are really easy to find if you're a business. Like there's bollards and there's lots of equipment and there's outdoor stuff and all the rest of it. And it's really attractive in the B2B market. But for me, as a consumer, I really don't want one of those on my front veranda. So I'm looking for something that is a little bit more refined and has a more attractive to me. And this is how I can drive the demand. So what if I could buy a whole range of products that were attractive for me, that had recycled content in them, that I could easily, without having to stand and look at a whole host of material, of information on the back, I don't need a PhD in science to understand this. I want to choose everyday items that are attractive, useful, fit for purpose, and have recycled content. And what's more, they're not necessarily more expensive. Because you know what? They are out there. There are lots and lots of products out there. And we're on a mission to bring them to the people. So I invite you to go to cleanup.org.au and have a sneak peek at what we've just soft launched today, which is called Buy Recycled. And what it is, it's a consumer-facing platform that showcases all sorts of items that are sorted by the way you and I already shop. So you can have everything from beautiful gifts for your family and friends, all the way through to the everyday necessities, the laundry, the bathroom, the office and stationery. Every product is profiled with connections to purchase. You can either purchase online or in store. We tell you where to go to get this. The range includes products supplied by small startups and cottage industries all the way through to national brands. Shoppers can be confident. This is a really important thing that has already been raised by a number of people about confidence. How do I know that this product actually does have the recycled content that is appealing to me? And this is where it becomes really important to remain very transparent. So every single product on this platform has been filtered. And all of the criteria against which it is measured is very clear and upfront as you have a look at every single product. So that you know, as a consumer, just exactly what you're buying. And there are various levels of recycled content available in these products. Quick fix, and you can make your decision. Companies self-declare their certifications. We can see here we've done some great work with GECA and the Carbon Reduction Institute. There's lots of recycling claim standards that are all being applied here. So every single product that is going into this platform has already ticked off where they sit on that. So with a single click, I can go through on that product, back to their sustainability claims, and I can then have the knowledge to make the decision that's right for me. Because you know what? That's what empowerment is all about. It's having the tools and the confidence to make the decision that is right for me at this point in time. And seeing the range of products that are clearly identifiable is a great demonstration of what happens when I take something out of my bin and it gets turned into something else. All of a sudden this has meaning because I can see it. I can actually see it, touch it, feel it. And in our experience, the greatest way to engage with your community is get them to see, touch and feel. And once they can do that, they're on the market. So what we're getting here is quality, useful, attractive products and packaging that I want, I can use, and what's more, I can continue to recycle it. So that's the way we want to invite every single consumer on this seminar today to help drive demand. Because as we've talked about, it's great to get the recycling stream, but if we don't turn it into something else, then it's just going to stockpile. And the last thing we want to do is we want to set stockpile. The power is with every single one of us. So if you've got products you want to include in this platform, give us a yell, cleanup.org.au. If you want to buy something, start clicking, have a look. There's lots and lots of stuff there, and it's continuing to be populated. There's lots and lots of more products coming our way by the hour. We've got lots of people out there at the moment trying to get stuff into this platform. So again, have a look. And also, just keep an eye on the Insta handles that we've got. It's buyrecycled.au, because you know what? You can actually be part of this problem. You and I can drive demand, and we can make just as much difference as individuals as we can when we're part of a business. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry Ann. We'll all have to go and check out Buy Recycled. And I love how easy it is, because we're really just trying to survive metaphorically and physically in the age of a pandemic. So easy, simple, drives results. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our second panellist, Natalie Isaac, CEO and founder of 1 Million Women. Since launching 1 Million Women in 2009, Natalie has dedicated herself to empowering women to act on climate change through the way they live. Under her leadership, 1 Million Women has grown from scratch into a movement of over 965,000. In 2017, Natalie was named the Australian Geographical Society Conservationist of the Year. In October 2018, Natalie released her book, Every Woman's Guide to Saving the Planet, and it remains the #1 bestseller in Booktopia Environmentalists category. In 2019, 1 Million Women won the Rare People's Choice Award out of 200 entries from 46 countries, a global award that honours behaviour change innovation. That deserves a round of applause. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this panel this afternoon. It's really great to be out. And this theme actually really goes to the heart and soul of 1 Million Women. It's the whole reason that we exist. We exist to shift attitudes and values and to shape new behaviours and make those behaviours stick. But I think I need to tell you that before I started 1 Million Women, I was a big player in perpetuating consumerism. I used to be a cosmetics manufacturer, and I was that for 24 years. And so my life was all about over-packaging, plastic packaging, microbeads, competitiveness, how you get somebody's product off the shelf so I could get mine on. I was even part of greenwashing. I had 4 brands. One of them, which I loved dearly, was no petrochemicals, no animal produce, no extra packaging, and was all about aromatherapy. The other 3 brands were fast fashion, cheap cosmetic brands with layers of packaging, with just crap inside, and which I sold through just about every department store in the country. So I may be the founder of 1 Million Women, but I'm not some long-term green role model. I'm actually quite the opposite. I only got the point on climate change a little over a decade ago. I had an epiphany and I changed, and it was something really simple. I got our household electricity consumption down by 20. And when I saw that I just saved all this money and pollution at the same time on the bill, that was it. That showed me that I was actually really powerful through everything I did, and it changed my life forever. I went on and got our household food waste down by something massive like 80%, and I stopped over consuming. And as you do, I, a couple of years later, started a women's movement. And for those of you who don't know much about 1 Million Women, we're not an environmental organisation, we're not a lifestyle website. We are a women's movement, and we empower and mobilise women and girls from across the world to fight the climate crisis through the way that we live, through every single choice that we make, through using our voice, our vote, our influence, and our economic power. We focus on the big themes of life. And, you know, it's been 10 years and we have come a long way. We're 965,000 women. So please, can you help us get to that extra 30,000? Last year, our blog was viewed 4 million times, and we reach millions every month across our social media channels. And waste is a really big topic for us. And reducing waste is critical to the circular economy. When I started 1 Million Women, I couldn't believe some of the stats that I was researching. You know, in Australia 10 years ago, I found out that we spend $10.5 billion on stuff that we barely or never use, and that stuff just goes into landfill. I don't know what that number is today. We waste 1 in 5 shopping bags of food. That's like going to the shopping centre, grabbing 5 bags of food and dropping 1 in the bin before you even make it home. We throw out 6 kilos of clothing every 10 minutes, and I think that you can all remember that powerful war on waste image of the 6 kilos of clothing there in Martin Place. Thank you, Craig. You know, all of this stuff just goes into landfill. And so as consumers, we have a huge role to play in shifting this story. And women have a huge role in shifting consumer trends. It is estimated that women now control 29.6 trillion of the world's wealth, and that is a little over 10%, and it's trending upwards. By 2028, women will be responsible for 2/3 of consumer spending worldwide. So imagine if we use that consumer power for the good of the planet. You know, as a cosmetics manufacturer, I have been to the dark side. I have seen this frenzy of overconsumption. I literally used to stand in stores near my product and watch my product being taken off the shelf into trolleys and to the checkout. And I was doing it to see how much product was getting off the shelf. But I saw that frenzy, particularly at Christmas time. And I actually, at the time, didn't care that product that you would buy, that you would get home, that you'd rip off the layers of packaging, you'd see the product inside, and within a week it would break. I didn't really care. I just cared about it being taken off the shelf. But you as the consumer, if you had left my product on the shelf to gather dust, it would have sent a message directly to me that you didn't want it, that you didn't want those layers of packaging. You didn't want the crap that was inside. And I think that is something we should never underestimate. We should never underestimate the power that we have as individuals, as consumers. It's not easy to change behaviour. I think in order to do it, we have to get ourselves outside of that structured framework of our high consumption society. You know, in places like Australia, in affluent countries, there's this misguided belief that happiness actually is defined by more stuff. The more stuff that we have, the happier we'll be. And that could not be further from the truth. Less is actually more. And it's something that we really push at 1 Million Women, something that I have learnt as a part of 1 Million Women. You know, I think the first step to profoundly changing the way that you live and doing things differently, the first step is to fall madly and deeply in love with the earth. You know, we have to understand that we, through our choices, we shape the world. We have to understand that in our hearts, not just articulate that in our heads, because when it travels to your heart and you really understand how powerful you are, honestly, I promise you, changing how you live becomes a much easier proposition. That's exactly what happened to me, and I see it every day with our 1 Million Women community. Now, we have so much going on at the moment that speaks to this, to the circular economy, that speaks to reducing waste. I would love everyone listening to please get involved. We have our Food Waste Free October campaign that just kicked off, and it is an awesome campaign. It's the first that we've done. We've got pro chefs showing us all how to have amazing recipes with zero waste. So please just jump onto our website and sign up to Food Waste Free October. We have our divestment campaign happening right now, where we're asking everybody to pledge that you will switch your bank and your super fund if you find that they are investing in fossil fuels. We have our new app that is all about behaviour change and how we profoundly do it, so please download that. We have our Love Earth Festival happening at the end of this year, and I can't tell you now, but we have some incredible people as part of it, so look out for that. And I think the most exciting thing for this conference is something that we've been working on over the last 6 months, and it is our Love Earth Marketplace. And it's launching soon. And it is a marketplace of all the brands and services that 1 million women truly loves. It is about showcasing the brands and services that are doing good for the planet, that are promoting a circular economy, that are not investing in fossil fuels, that are helping us all to reduce waste. So it's a new venture for us, and if there is any business out there that would like to know more about our Love Earth Marketplace, could you please get in touch with me? We have GECA on board. They have their special spot there, which is really great. You know, climate change needs us all, and we all need to do everything we can across all sectors, and how we live, individual action, collective action, the sharing economy, the circular economy, living with less, less is more, is all something that we need to embrace. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I love a good story about the power of an epiphany, and that just inspires change, and thank you for your honesty, because it's a journey. It's a big journey. I'd now like to introduce our third panellist, Gordon Renewal, who is the CEO and founder of Good On You. So Good On You, is the world's leading sustainability rating system for fashion brands. He has been a consumer advocate for 30 years, including as head of campaigns at Choice, a board member of Consumers International, and deputy chair of the Consumers Federation of Australia. In 2016, he was invited by the ACCC and Choice to give the annual Ruby Hutchins lecture, Can Consumers Buy a Better World?, in which he explored our right to consume responsibly and the corresponding obligations on producers to provide accurate information about their impact on the issues consumers care about. He was a director/chair of the board of Australia's leading environmental certification scheme, Good Environmental Choice Australia, for 10 years until 2019. Please join me in welcoming Gordon Renewal.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you everybody for having me. It's great to be talking to those of us in the room and many more people online. I just want to make 3 points and then talk about Good On You as part of the solution. But before we talk about Good On You, some sort of comments directly on the question of consumer empowerment in relation to circular economy and more broadly environmental impact and sustainability. So those points are, what in fact do consumers want? Or more broadly, we need to properly understand what consumers are looking for. Some of those points have been touched on today, but I'll talk a little more. The second thing is, earlier I heard somebody say that consumers have a responsibility to do something, which I think is, with all due respect, a complete waste of time. Consumers have a right to consume sustainably, and I'll talk a bit more about why that's a more useful framing. And the next point is, what's stopping you being more sustainable? Again, we've touched on some of the barriers like price, and I think we need a more nuanced understanding of what exactly stops consumers taking the actions that are pro-sustainability, pro-circularity. And then I'll talk a little bit about Good On You as a partial solution to those barriers. And Craig earlier talked about the limitations on voluntary labelling. Well, Good On You, you can think of as a non-voluntary labelling system. We choose whether we label you or not. It's not up to you to pay money to a certification scheme. We love certification schemes. I was, after all, chair of GECA for 10 years, but they have a part to play, but then we've got to deal with the brands and products that are not subject to those schemes. Okay, so what do consumers want when they shop? We know consumers will say, 80% of them will say, sure, I'll pay more money for a sustainable good, but actually they're not out there doing that. So what's actually going on? And there's a danger, having observed that, to be really cynical and say consumers will only buy stuff if it's the same price and does the same stuff and sustainability is irrelevant to them, which I think is going too far. On the other hand, we don't want to be naive about consumers either. What we do know is that there's some long-standing research by Mobium in Australia, which suggests that maybe 80–90% of us will want to purchase more sustainable products. And maybe 10%, 8% actually don't give a whatever. But only about 50% of us have an emotional engagement, and we feel bad when we're not actually buying something better. And it's that 50% who get something out of buying something more sustainable above and beyond the price-quality relationship. And they're the people who will create the future. So the way I think about it is that, and it's important to realise that nobody goes to the shops to buy a sustainable good. Well, less than 1% of people go to the shops to buy a sustainable good. And if you're buying something because it's sustainable, but you don't need it, you're not being sustainable. So you always go to the shops or make a consumer choice to buy something, rent something, not do either of those things, borrow from a friend. When you do that, you're trying to meet a need in your life. And that's where consumers are starting. And if we don't start there with them, we can't possibly get them to buy more sustainably. They want a new dress to wear to a party. They want an outfit to go to work. They want a screwdriver to put the IKEA thing together. No, IKEA comes with things, doesn't it? So the non-IKEA thing together. They want to figure out how to get to work. They've always got a problem to solve, and that problem's partly practical and partly about their identity. They want a red dress to go to the party. They don't want a green dress, because that's not them. So the problem is, I want a red dress to go to a party, but you're trying to sell me to buy a Fairtrade t-shirt. It's kind of not working. So the consumer needs to know okay, there's no Fairtrade red dresses. There probably are, but let's imagine there's none in Australia, which may well be true. What's the next best option? This is where a non-voluntary labelling system comes in. This is where a product like Good On You, which makes it really easy to determine the trade-offs that you're making every time you make a consumption choice, where you're looking, you care about sustainability, you care about the impact on workers, you care about the impact on animals, you care about your hip pocket, you care about how you look, you care about a whole bunch of stuff. You care about whether you can be bothered walking to the more sustainable store further away than Woolworths. You care about all those things, and you're always trading them off. So it's a big trade-off we're looking at. Okay, so the next thing is that, as I said before, I think it's very important to think of consumers as having a right to consume responsibly, not an obligation. We know before that people want to, but they only want to do it when it's really easy. So what's the corollary of a right? The corollary of the right is that other people, primarily businesses, have an obligation to provide consumers with all the information they need to make a sustainable or circular choice. And if a business doesn't do that, if a business is not transparent, as 1 million women said in their Instagram just today, if a business is not being transparent about what it's doing, you're pretty well advised to suspect that they're not doing the right thing. And Good On You system of rating brands is built on that obligation to be transparent. So just quick, I better skip through this, but many years ago, President Kennedy proposed that consumers had 4 rights, and then in the 70s, the OECD and Consumers International said they had 4 more. So we have 8 official consumer rights. I say there's a 9th, which is the right to consume responsibly. So what is in fact stopping you and other consumers from making sustainable choices? There's a lot of things. It's not just price. It's not easy being green, haha, joke. So there's awareness. Did I even know that climate change was an issue? Of course I did. Did I know microplastics in the water system was an issue? Well, I didn't know that 5 years ago. Did I know waste was an issue? Not until I watched Craig on telly. And so awareness is really important. Like, do I know something is an issue? Knowledge about which brands are doing better is another issue I need to know. I need to have access to those brands. So we tell the world about which brands are sustainable, and people come back to us and say, but those brands are in Sweden. I don't want to import them to Australia for climate change, carbon emissions reasons, which may or might not be right, by the way, pork to Europe, etc. But there's certainly other reasons why you won't want to do that. Price. You can't talk about price in isolation from what you're buying. When you're buying something, you're not just buying, depends on the thing. If you're buying a screwdriver, you probably actually care about whether it's a screwdriver that works. But then even there, you've got questions of, do you want a quality screwdriver or not? But when you're buying other things like cars, how to get to work or clothes, your identity comes into it as well. And sustainability is part of your identity. So the people who bought a Prius, they were buying a Corolla at double the price. All the rest of the price was justified by the sustainability aspect of it. And so, I mean, there's only a few people who bought Priuses, but there's a curve, you know. Impact, somebody before suggested that it's important to know what the impact is. So when I buy something, partly because it's more sustainable, I've got to believe it's going to have an impact. There are other things we need to address too, habits, social pressure. So these jeans, you won't be able to see this offline, these jeans are a bit short. I mean, some people socks, something like that. Now, they're quite a sustainable pair of jeans, and I should just throw them away and get a new pair, shouldn't I? Or do I walk down the street and look daggy? I mean, it's an issue. Very nice colours. I'm showing off my even more sustainable socks. We're not going to have much time to hear about Good On You, so I'll just run through it really quickly. Good On You is a rating system for brands. We rate brands based on their transparency about sustainability issues. We have become a go-to source for sustainable fashion. We've got about 3,000 brands rated. About 700,000 people use Good On You each month around the world, mainly in North America, Australia and Europe. Consumers can search ratings and they can also discover new brands. We also work with retailers to help them get their message out if they are in fact sustainable. To help retailers find sustainable brands to stock and then to demonstrate to their users that they are sustainable. And I might just leave it at that. And if you want to know more about Good On You, you can always ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gordon. Some good points about wanting to look like a good human and wanting to look like a good human with short pants or long pants. Either work. So the last person that I'm going to introduce really doesn't need an introduction, but that is Craig Reucassel. As you know, he's an Australian writer and comedian, best known for his work on The Chaser, as well as his declared war on waste, which opened up Australia's eyes to the effect waste has on all aspects of life. Please join me in welcoming Craig.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Time ago, I'm going to do it to time. All right, we've been talking about circular economy. We've been talking about the need to have an actual demand for these goods. It's no good coming up with a solution, but no one actually purchasing it. There's no good saying we're not going to send it overseas if it's just going to end up in the bin. We've talked earlier on about procurement, and that's a really important part of it. But I guess this panel's more talking about consumers and people ourselves who go, we want to support it. You know, I want to support recycling. I don't want to just put my recycling in the bin and then it get taken away and it end up in landfill. I want to actually support it. So how do you actually do that? I guess for me, it's interesting. Really the key thing about this is about information and trust when it comes to consumer. People are overwhelmed by information, and it really comes down to trusting a brand or a label or a group of people. So for instance, if you are a massive fan of Clean Up Australia, the fact that there's a buy recycled website, then you can go there and you can trust them in the same way that if you are a big fan of 1 Million Women, you can go to Love Earth Marketplace and you can buy there. That's a great way of doing it because the trust is instilled there. You're going to trust that these guys are doing the hard yards for me and figuring out that these are the good products to do it. Now, a lot of people obviously, a lot of people do purchase online nowadays, but the other side of this is that, a lot of people still go to shops and purchase that way. And there's an interesting question about that of how do we actually instill in those people some kind of feedback to actually make sure people choose the correct product and do they trust it? And a big part of that is, again, about building the trust in certain brands. What's interesting here is that we've got, you know, in our first panel today, we had GECA and MSC and FSC, and they're all different brands in different areas there. And I guess they have a strength in those areas because people that deal with those products know those particular brands. But it's also hard for them because at the moment it's not compulsory, it's not, you know, it's a voluntary system generally, and it requires, once again, I think that too much in Australia at the moment, we rely on people basically, we rely on a small proportion of people that give a shit doing everything. And that's the wrong approach. We've got to be setting up structures and systems and rules to actually make sure that everybody is being funneled towards the beneficial, the end result that's beneficial most for humanity, for our society, for the environment. Generally speaking, we don't do that kind of thing. So we need to kind of build up more. It's interesting when we looked at carbon offsetting on Fight for Planet A, and there's actually a really great system in Australia. There's a lot of hoops that people have to jump through to actually do that. And yet when we talk to people, most people were, A, didn't know about it, or B, the second thing, they were really skeptical. Oh, I reckon the companies just take that money themselves. I don't reckon they give it to anything. And it's, you know, all of that kind of problem there. The first step is kind of building a brand, building a Gecko, or building 1 Million Women or something like that, and actually building the product and building it and making sure it's trusted. But the hard part is then getting people to understand it and actually getting on board. And that's that really hard part. And I think part of the problem is that we've got so many different brands trying to promote themselves. It'd be great if we had more. This is, I love the idea of the trusted brands coming together, because we need brands to work together. We need to be kind of something where people really simply on the front of a box can see it and go, I know what that is. I understand. It's a simple metric for me to get to. And that's what we don't really have when it comes to environmental stuff. And I know it's difficult. It's interesting. Tesco in 2007 started trying to put branding of carbon footprint on their foods. And 5 years later, after no one else copied them and they had only been able to do a small part of their actual products, they just gave up. And they were just like, this is a nightmare. But, you know, that's what we need. We need groups to be working together to be able to solve this, to be able to give a simple solution, a simple kind of metric that people could understand, whether you find it through the Million Women website or through Gecko or otherwise. We need to have some kind of really simple mechanism, because people are just confused and consumers are overwhelmed by how many things they have here. Now that would obviously be helped if there was some kind of system pushing you towards it. And that's what we don't have. And unfortunately, what we do tend to end up is we have industry groups or brands making up their own little models, which then makes it more confusing for people who, when you have independent models, you know, they don't actually see the difference between them. And we need some kind of actual model to promote that. And it's interesting. It's my constant bang my head against the wall, but it'd be great if there was just some kind of mandatory system. Some kind of system actually said, look, you're going to have to actually get a rating on it. The government will help you pay for the life cycle assessment. We know it's an expensive thing, but we want everyone to be thinking about this. If it's done on an everyone has to do it basis, then you don't have the situation we've talked about earlier today, that the first leaders, the ones that are trying to do the right things, in a sense get punished because they're paying more and going through extra things and not necessarily being rewarded as the first movers in that situation. I've just been writing a book off the back of Fight for Planet A. And I compared the mandatory approach of Europe to the voluntary approach of Australia. And this is actually in car emissions. It's hysterical. It's ridiculous. They have achieved so much more by actually having rules that people have to follow. We, during the same period that they had rules that people followed, that people got to, that people actually got better than, we, during the same period, had about 7 discussion papers that achieved, I won't say because it's a swear word, but very little. So we've really got to have, I would love for government and these great organisations that are independent to work together to actually come up with a system so that we had something very simple that consumers could engage with. Because at the moment, it's a kind of complex system. And the more that the brands can work together, the more you can promote each other and work together and get it so that everyone through the different networks is seeing it, but also that there's kind of it comes back, it's interesting, the show that's about to be on Big Weather, the review of fire warnings and how confusing they are and how many people are confused by those fire warnings. It is totally a confusing system. We've got to get a simple system where everyone can go, look, this is GECA or this is forest stewardship, but we're all coming together to kind of put our knowledge and our information towards a system that's really simple. We can all go, it's got 4 trees out of 5, great. That's what I should be going for, because at the moment it's just too confused. And from a consumer perspective, it's really hard to follow it. And I guess that's why websites and having places that you can go and find your own solutions where you say, this has been curated for me, is probably the most realistic situation at the moment. But it'd be great to take that next step, because consumers are desperate to make the right choice. That's what we found. People want to make the right choice. They're generally not, lots of people out there they're not choosing to not make the right choice. They're just too confused to actually do it. So if we can get a simple system that people can follow and understand, then we'll get far more. And then the great part about that is that then that feeds back in the system. It means that those that are doing the right thing, that are using recycled content, that are, carbon neutral farms, or the people that are doing the right steps, then get rewarded by the system, which doesn't often happen enough. So anyway, that's hopefully where we can head in the future.
Thank you, Craig. Okay, so now we're at the Q&A part of this panel, and we've got one question coming through, which is a nice segue from what you were just talking about, Craig, because we've heard about incentivization or legislation, but the question is, what can each panelist give one key action for consumers wanting to make an Australian circular economy a reality? Natalie, I might start with you.
Okay, one, I can only give one. So if it's my one, it's we can consume less. And I think that because that's all part of the circular economy too. So it's a simple one. Just take a breath before you buy something, and ask yourself, do I really need it? And what can I do? Where can it go when I'm finished with it? So buy less.
Cart abandonment is not a bad thing in this particular context. Gordon, what about you?
There's probably millions, but just one. Think about the total cost of ownership of anything. So buy quality rather than stuff that's going to fall apart, or think about the running cost of something and not just the upfront cost, and obviously factor in the sustainability aspects in that conversation.
Yeah, and it is an interesting one, because I mean, as you guys were talking, I was reminded of something that I read once, which comes back to the Keep Cup thing, where someone went into a cafe, bought their coffee in a takeaway cup, then walked out, poured the coffee into their Keep Cup and went into their office. And it's that personal brand versus the behaviour. So maybe that's something that they needed to think about before they bought their Keep Cup. Terry Ann, what are your thoughts?
Just don't underestimate the power that you have. So every single one of us has enormous power. We live in a democracy and we are the government. So let's not consider that we don't have the power to make the change and exercise that power. Let's all just get on board and do one small thing. As if 1 million people do one small thing, look what happens. We make great change. So don't underestimate how much power you have, and don't be shy of exercising it.
Yeah, I thank you for a testament to that, if I do say so. And we can't all make TV shows, Craig.
No, what are you doing? I mean,
what are your thoughts?
Look, they do very little anyway. I guess an interesting thing is, look, there's two different ways. I actually look at the government perspective. I think to keep pressure up on government about the moment, because they're really talking a big talk about the circular economy, and they are doing some good stuff in terms of passing legislation and that, but the pressure needs to be kept up for them to say, you've talked about this is where you're going. Are you actually doing it? Are you actually getting there? So I think keeping that vision and not forgetting about it is an important thing in terms of keeping pressure on government to do the right thing.
Yeah. So that's all the questions that we've got, but thank you very much for your time today. And now I'm going to welcome up to the stage Michelle to close us out for the day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. And thank you, everyone. I just really wanted to say this has been a fantastic event for me. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much today. I think this area is always about learning, and there are a few words and a few key takeout phrases that I just wanted to share. I heard a lot about trust, about collaboration. I love the clever science from Veena. Demand for recycled products, demand for recycled content, and creating that demand.
consumers are becoming more aware, consumers are becoming more savvy to these things. You have that power, as Terry Ann says. So make that choice, make that change yourself. It is about all of us making 1 million small changes, which would be fantastic. I just want to say very quickly, sorry for all the technical glitches. I think that's probably the world that we're currently living in, and we do get kind of used to these technical glitches these days. I wanted to say a big, massive thank you to the City of Sydney. Without the City of Sydney's funding and support, this event wouldn't be here and happening today. The City of Sydney have been a great partner for GECA over the many years, and have not only helped us with this event, but previous events, and also helped funding with the Waste Service Standard. I want to thank our licensees for these lovely chairs, from Keizu, the NanoSyn from Microsafe Care, and also the sanitizer from eWater Systems. I want to really thank all of the speakers who did a fantastic job today. I've really, really enjoyed, and as I said, I've learned so much today from each and every one of them. Thanks to Councillor Jess Miller and Assistant Minister Trevor Evans for taking time out of the day. Thank you very much to Craig for keeping us all entertained and keeping us on point throughout the day. And thank you very much for joining us online today. It's been great to have everybody here. One final quick thank you that I would like to say to my entire GECA team. I would not be able to stand up here in front of everybody without my entire team. They are a passionate, amazing group of individuals that work for this space and work to do the best thing. And finally, I'd really like to thank Paula Claspy. Without her, this event would really not have happened. She has put such a massive effort into this, and really from start to finish she's been totally involved. So please give a big, massive round of applause for Paula. And thank you very much for joining.
I think I meant to wrap up, but I can't do better than Michelle just did. That was fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Gecko. Thank you, City of Sydney. And thanks to everyone who's taken part today. Let's make circular economy a real thing. Yeah.